This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back, everybody, to Wrestling Omakase. It is episode number 147, and this week, before I get into anything else, we did this last week, and I want to do it again. Black Lives Matter. If you are able to, please donate to a charitable organization. I'm going to put a link in the description, which has a lot of different kinds of, different charities you can donate to, from victim memorial funds to bail funds to mega funds, which are, this is what I actually did, the Act Blue mail fund, or mega funds, where they will split up your donation across a whole bunch of different organizations. There's also things called community restoration funds, community enrichment organizations. There's a ton of stuff. So, please, I know a lot of people have donated, and some of the numbers have been really staggering. So please continue to donate. Black Lives Matter, and that's the absolute first thing I wanted to say before anything else. So we will again make the awkward transition from that to pro wrestling. I'm very pleased to be joined by a debuting guest, Brandon Thurston from Wrestlenomics. Hi, Brandon.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's your very first time on the podcast. Part of the tour we're doing, kind of the other Voices of Wrestling podcast network shows. And you were one I wanted to have on immediately, because when I came up with this idea, because
really,
what you do is so different from what we do, and I feel like nobody ever I listen to Wrestlenomics quite a lot, and I get to hear your thoughts on graphs and stuff, but I feel like you never get to just dive into a match or talk about the subjective side of wrestling. So I figured that would be interesting for people to hear you, and I'm sure fun for you to do.
Yeah. So I've been doing Wrestlenomics going back since when I started with Chris Harrington, 2017. And we've always kind of tried to focus on doing stuff that's a little bit different and not necessarily talking about what we thought about matches and stuff. But, and the truth is, I watched 5 matches today, just before we got on the phone here. And this is probably, to tell you the truth, I don't watch that much. I'm watching with my full attention, watching a match, watching wrestling. And I was thinking earlier this afternoon while I was watching all these matches, you know what? I probably haven't watched 5 matches in the entire, focused. My attention is solely on the TV and watching the matches. I probably haven't done that in the entire time of the quarantine here since about the middle of March. Really the most time that I spend watching matches has been, and we're not even training right now, so it has been at training where we would have people do practice matches, and I'll try to give them feedback and stuff. I have a training school that I'm a part of in the Buffalo area here called Grapplers Anonymous. So what I did was I just sort of took some notes as I was doing this, and I was realizing that this is very much sort of like the way that I take notes when I watch some of the students wrestle, although the quality of wrestling is very different.
Yeah. I mean, that's the other thing too, is obviously you're an in-ring wrestler, so it's always interesting to me to hear what wrestlers think when they talk about matches. I mean, you're the second, I believe, in-ring wrestler to appear on the show, because we had Gran Akuma on a couple years ago. Yeah, so you're the second one who's actually had match experience. I might be forgetting somebody, but I don't think I am. But yeah, so that I always like getting that perspective too.
Yeah, and like the other thing too is, so all 5 of the matches that we watched for this are from Japan, and I don't know if you know. So I was wondering too, John, like how long have you been watching Japanese wrestling for?
About oh god, this will be like my 19th year.
Okay, so what year is that?
Like 2001, 02. Like later
okay,
yeah.
Okay, well, very good. So I think I started in 2000. I started getting tapes. Maybe 99. I got like a Hayabusa tape, and then it took me like 8 months to a year to get into the rest of it. But I started to get like some All Japan around 2000, and I really got into it. From about 2000 to 2003, I was very into it, and I got tapes all the time. And then about the time I started like training and actually being on some indie shows here, that's when I sort of fell out of it until New Japan got really hot in the last few years, so like 2013, 14.
So you're another, like, I guess I always call us like puro old heads, I guess. Yeah. And you'd be the rare guest who's been watching this stuff longer than I have.
Are you from the VHS era? You have VHS tapes?
I don't actually, because basically when I started, I think like the very first things I bought may have been VHS, like from I've told this story a million times, but there was this table at Jersey All Pro Wrestling back in the day called Mayfield Mayhem, and they used
George Mayfield.
Yes, he used to do like he's
from Buffalo.
Oh, I didn't even know that. Wow. I mean, he was at every single fucking Jersey All Pro show.
So like I don't know if he still lives in Buffalo, but I would go to some shows in Rochester, New York. And he would be there, like, with his table, with all of his tapes and DVD. I think he was selling DVDs by the time I encountered him. But, like, I remember, like, going to the after party and, like, sort of, like, talking to him about, like, he used to go to the Tokyo Dome, and he was at the Big Egg Dome show for All Japan Women and stuff like that.
Yeah, he ran tours. I remember begging my dad to let me go on one of the tours, and, like, because I think he was promoting as his last tour in, like, I don't know the exact year, probably 03, 04 or something. And, that did not happen. I would not make it to Japan until 2016. But yeah, it was but the Mayfield Mayhem thing was my first thing. I don't know if I may have bought 1 or 2 tapes before he was then selling DVDs. And then after that, I found, so where I lived in New Jersey at the time, I was pretty close to a Japanese, like, supermarket. And in there, they had a video rental store, which is like designed for Japanese immigrants, where they would tape basically all this Japanese TV, and it would be on DVD-Rs at the time. Yeah. And you would just, rent them for like $1 or $2 or something and bring them back. Wow. And this was designed for immigrants, but they taped all the fucking Japanese wrestling that was airing at the time. So I just was renting all that stuff. So that was my go-to for a while. And then I think I also got like male DVDs too from like, some of the things going on. And then finally we got to like the download era, I guess, like towards the end of the mid to late aughts. I don't know if you're an aughts guy. But... Yeah,
I think I fell out just around the time that, people were talking about offering DVDs instead of VHS. And like actually from like 2001 to 2003, I had like a website where I would go on the Japanese sports sites every day. And wait for them to do their update, and then like put the page through the Alta Vista translator or whatever, and try to like post news notes from what I could derive from the translated Japanese to have like this Japanese news wrestling website.
Yeah, that's people had I guess all sorts of like auto translated sites at the time. I definitely remember that. Yeah. And then like I don't. This I've never heard people talk about. I know it existed in my head. Do you remember when New Japan had like a proto subscription site like very early? I want to say like maybe like 03, 04.
No, for video for their show.
They had like they had video for their shows because no one ever talks about it. So I assume it wasn't very popular. But I subscribed. I like worked through the tutorial that was on like Strong Style Spirit at the time and subscribed to it. The quality was hideous, as you can imagine. But yeah, that existed in like the early to mid aughts. I don't remember even. I think it was only like it was like a certain kind of show. Like basically, how like now you have Samurai TV shows. You have shows that are on TBS side channel too. I want to say it was like only a certain type, like shows that aired on a certain network.
But they were doing ESPN at the time.
Yes, I was about to say. I think it was ESPN. So I think it was the shows that aired on the ESPN in Japan at the time. So that's a very interesting little footnote. That didn't last very long because I remember being subscribed to it for a little while and then it just kind of went away. But that was like a very early attempt at like video on demand.
Yeah. So how many times have you been to Japan now? I've never been to Japan. It's sort of on my list of like something I should probably do sometime in my life.
So I've been there 3 times.
Wow.
Invasion Attack 2016. It was like basically Alan for Al, who's going to be on next week, which I can good little transition. But he like organized a trip to Japan based around going to Invasion Attack, which is like the big before it was Sakura Genesis, it was Invasion Attack, and we went.
Did you go with Todd Martin?
In 2017, so that was the next trip. So yeah, the 2016 trip. That only happened because I went to... So I was thinking of going, and then I went to a casino in like January 2016 in Foxwoods on like a trip I had already planned. And like some kind of like act of God, it was like the best casino trip I've ever had. Like I couldn't lose the entire 2 days I was there. Won probably close to $1,000. And like I took that as like someone telling me, just go, basically. And it was like the amount of money that I needed to go on this trip. I probably could have swung it anyway, but like, having an extra $1,000 was like, well, now I definitely can swing it. So now I'm going to go. And so that was my first trip and, had such an amazing time. I went back in 2017 for the G1. So I saw the last 3 nights of the G1 when Naito won. And that was a trip I went on that also had like Todd Martin and Mort, who's like a Twitter guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a bunch of other people. And, that was summer 2017. And then I went last year, 2019, for Dominion and the Best of Super Junior final. So, yeah. And I'm supposed to go again this year for the G1 finals in October. Will that happen? I don't know. With everything going on.
It looks like maybe there's a chance that they'll be doing shows by the summer, and I bet the airfare will probably be a little bit cheaper too.
Well, I already have.
If that's the case,
I already have my airfare. So that's like the big mystery. So I bought my airfare way back in January when like they had a big sale, and now it's like will they let me in the country is the big question. Like I would go to Japan. Right. If they let me in the country, I would go even if New Japan isn't running shows because there's enough Japanese stuff that I'm into that I'd more than be able to entertain myself for 10 days. But the big question to me is like, will they let me in the country? But yeah,
will they let Americans into the country?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think New Japan will be back next month. I mean, that's what it sounds like. The Super J-Cast people, they're very well connected to New Japan, and they were dropping very obvious hints on their show that like, maybe 2 nights in Osaka next month will be the thing. So
yeah, I've been looking at a lot of the COVID data, and their cases are so low relative to what the U.S. is, and there's all sorts of factors that may be determining that. But it looks like they're at least compared to the U.S. and even compared to Mexico, their cases, their prevalence seems to be pretty low at this point.
Yeah, they've had a minor spike the last 2 days in Tokyo, which I know is worrying them a little bit. Now, their idea of a minor spike is 30 cases and 28 cases in these 2 days, which I wish we had that in New York, honestly. But yeah, I mean, that's freaked them out a little bit as they're reopening stuff. But Osaka, where New Japan's planning to run the show, has had I think like 3 straight days of no cases. So it looks like Tokyo is like the hot spot, which it has been all along. But
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, based on how I don't know if you've looked into like the, they're opening in stages, right? So right now it's 50% up to 100. So you can do 50% of the building capacity up to 100 people. And DDT is running a bunch of shows this month, like in small venues like Shinkiba, and there's even smaller one called the Itabashi Green Hall in Tokyo that are going to be like 100 people max. The next phase after that is 50% up to 1,000, which I think they'll hit, if they don't reverse within 2 weeks. And then another 2 weeks after that is 50% of the building capacity with no maximum. So that's the one it looks like New Japan is waiting for because they want to come back with like a big show at Osaka Joe Hall where you can put like 3,000 or 4,000 in probably. So yeah.
So has anybody done shows with fans yet in Japan?
Yes, because Michinoku Pro did it was very limited, but they had dojo shows, and it was open to 10 fans.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. But I think I think somebody else is doing. I know Pro Wrestling Wave was doing Shinkiba. I don't know if it happened already or if that's a Joshi promotion. I don't know if it happened already or is about to happen. But yeah, and I think the first ones I've seen on the schedule for sure are DDT and Tokyo Joshi. Noah had a rule about no screaming, which that's going to be a rule when they come back, which is going to be something for a wrestling show, especially a Japanese wrestling show because they love yelling the name. But I don't know, that'll be weird. But yeah, I guess that's what's going on. But yeah, you totally should go to Japan. It's pretty awesome. It's really it's a lot. I know it's very expensive, days. But yeah. It's really. I mean,
it's sort of like I'm kind of waiting until I'm old and washed up, so I don't feel like I flew myself to Japan, but I didn't wrestle or something. So maybe.
I didn't even think of that. Yeah, you could probably get yourself booked on like that, like one of those that Jimmy Suzuki guy. He runs those indie shows where I feel like a ton of indie wrestlers go over there and then just like fly themselves over and then just wrestle those shows.
I think there are a lot of people who are a lot of the wrestlers. The impression I get is a lot of the wrestlers who are not from Japan who end up wrestling in Japan. On the lower level promotions, they fly themselves there, and they may or may not make their money back through wrestling. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah.
Yeah, I've always got the impression that it's like it's just kind of like a bucket list thing, and they do it to do it, and like, they probably did take a loss on it, but
Yeah, it's I think that's just largely kind of just an international version of what happens for a lot of people in indie wrestling in general. For in the Northeast, for example, a lot of people are driving around and they're not making a lot of money, if any, or they may be losing money. But it's all part of the the climbing the ladder to get your name out there and to get more bookings and accumulate more and more buzz around you, so that eventually maybe you do start making money, or maybe somebody does sign a contract.
Yeah, but I mean, whenever you do go there, I think you'll have a lot of fun. It's it's a really, besides the fact that the wrestling scene is like really amazing, and you'll pretty much never go anywhere where you'll see like so many wrestling shows of like such a different, of like all very slightly different too, and like in all these different venues. Like it's very close to, like, I don't know if you've ever been to a WrestleMania weekend, but it's like a WrestleMania weekend all the time. It's the only way I can put it, Yeah. But
right, because there's shows at Korakuen Hall like every day, right?
Yeah, I mean, like on some of these trips I've gone to, like, I think one of them was like 16 shows in like 13 days or something, and I've seen people do more than that. Like, I've seen people do like 3 shows a day. So I mean, you can go to a lot of shows if you want to.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
It also adds up though. So like I've done the budget on some of my trips, and like the wrestling tickets end up being like a big line item, like as far, because like hotel, like hotel/Airbnb is a lot cheaper than you might think, and food can be very cheap, especially if you're like me and you're used to New York City prices. You'll just be like, what the fuck? Like, how are these prices? Yeah. Especially like alcohol too. It's like, what the fuck? But yeah, the wrestling tickets add up really quickly. But what are you gonna do? Before we get into our 5 matches here, I want to very quickly, and I promise it'll be quicker than last week, plug the Patreon, which just started at Wrestling Omakase. It's Patreon/Wrestling Omakase. We've gotten a very good early response here, and I really want to thank everybody that signed up. It's been a fun. I know there's a lot going on right now. First of all, so I really appreciate it if you decided to, give us a shot and give us a chance to entertain you. We've got a lot of stuff up there already. We have the first few episodes of my new series, watching all the Tanahashi Okada matches in order. So the first 2 episodes are up right now as I'm recording this. The third one on the Dominion 2012 match will be up, tomorrow when I'm recording this, which might be Friday, June 5th, might be the same day this goes up. So, that will be up shortly, or is already up by the time you hear this. So you have 3 episodes of that already, in there. You have the first episode of Anime Omakase, where, my girlfriend Nicole and I recorded an episode just as part of a series just on anime. We've had a lot of anime talk on this show before that people seem to enjoy. So I know as soon as I did that, Kevin from the Bad Wrestling Podcast, who's been on this show before, reached out and said we have to do an episode on the completely insane Attack on Titan whenever that finally finishes its run in the manga. So we're definitely going to do that. But yeah, that's a future plan. But yeah, so we have that up, and then next week we'll have the first totally exclusive to the Patreon episode of Wrestling Omakase. Full episode. It will not be on the free feed. It'll be numbered just like this. So episode 148 will be exclusive to Patreon. The only way to get it will be to sign up at patreon.com/Wrestling Omakase. It'll be me. It'll be Alan for L from the PW Torch, Alan Cunahan, who I'm very excited to have on, and we have a great slate of matches. So, and if you sign up for the Patreon, you get to vote for the 5th match. Only patrons will be able to vote for the 5th match. So, if you think any of this sounds interesting, patreon.com/Wrestling Omakase. It's only $5 a month. You get access to everything we have on there. Only $5 a month. The Allen episode, the Tanahashi Okada series, and Anime Omakase, plus in the future extra coverage of tournaments and I might be doing something. We just talked about the DDT shows reopening. I'm thinking of doing like a live reaction for the first show. With not the first show with crowd, but the first show with a significant crowd back in Japan. I thought that'd be fun to do. So that'll all be on the Patreon. Patreon.com/Wrestling Omakase. The link will also be in the show description. $5 a month gets you all that. So definitely check it out. All right, let's get into the 5 matches we are talking about here today. The first one, it was your first pick, Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Taue versus Mitsuharu Misawa and Kenta Kobashi, All Japan Pro Wrestling, June 9th, 1995. I usually ask guests, why did you pick this match and what made you want to talk about it, or what made you want to, have me or the listeners, watch it. But, I don't know if I really need to ask that question for this match, because it's like the canon greatest tag team match of all time. I don't really know if you have to explain yourself here, but go ahead. Why'd you pick?
Yeah, well, I just kind of picked 2 of my favorite matches off the top of my head, or, the third one, I just kind of picked, I guess I picked sort of 2 older matches relative to, a lot of stuff from modern times, but I guess I picked one that was a little bit newer. But yeah, this is Kawada and Taue against Kobashi Misawa, and you mentioned it as it has this it has this sort of subtitle to it, and I wondered if everybody got that message. I remember a website called Ultimo Tape World, I think it was called, or Ultimo Tapes, and they kind of marketed, and it's not probably know this was illegal, but they kind of marketed it as the greatest tag match of all time, or the greatest tag match ever. And I don't know if that was a Meltzer thing. And then of course there was also the greatest singles match ever, and that's the 6-3-94 Misawa versus Kawada singles match. So I wonder where that comes from, because I really have no idea. Again, I don't know if it's a Meltzer thing, if Meltzer maybe said it was the greatest tag match you'd ever seen at that point.
I'm pretty sure it was, because I remember. So I don't know if you know this, but after the Revolution pay-per-view this year,
right,
Dave said the Omega Page versus Young Bucks match was the greatest tag match ever, and it led to a lot of angry tweets, which I don't know why people even get worked out about Dave and Kenny and Bucks match at this point. It's you have to expect it. Before that match took place, I was he's probably going to say this is the best tag match of all time. But I still haven't seen that match. I can't say anything about its quality. I mean, you could. What do you? Which is better, Brandon? Give me your answer.
I don't. That's from the AEW pay-per-view. I didn't see it.
Okay. Well, there you go. Neither one of us has seen it. So. Yeah. But yeah. So this tag match, I think it was a Dave thing. It's been one of those things that I also just think got a life of its own on the internet. And 90s All Japan is just a very beloved era of wrestling. I know, speaking of our guest for next week on the Patreon, Alan, when Alan recently said a couple years ago that he thinks this era of New Japan that we're currently in was better. I don't remember if he said it was as good as or better than 90s All Japan. That caused a massive meltdown on Twitter, because this era is just so put on such a pedestal that I think for a lot of people it just was almost sacrilegious to say that. But but yeah, I mean,
I pulled up the Observer for where he reviews it. I'm just scanning it. I don't see him saying it's the greatest tag match he's ever seen, but he did give it the 5 stars with the plus after all the asterisks.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I know he said it at some point, but I could be wrong, I guess. I think it won Match of the Year that year too, right?
95. What wins in 95? Not this match.
Oh, wow.
Wins in 95. 94, the ladder match with Michaels and Razor Ramon wins.
Yeah.
I used to have this stuff memorized. The 1995 Wrestling Observer Match of the Year.
I can tell you, I have it in front of me. Oh, okay. Actually, the match they picked is also a very, very famous match, and I'm not surprised it beat this, I guess. But it's a women's match.
Oh, it's It's Minami Toyota versus Kyoko Inoue in an hour draw. Yeah.
Yeah. From May 7th in Tokyo.
Yeah,
So,
nobody talks about that match, at least in places I pay attention to anymore.
it might be on next week's episode.
Oh.
That'd be a good... Let me see, though. He picked something. It might have been this. I'm going to check. If he didn't pick it, then I'm definitely going to put it on something. No, never mind. I'm sorry. He picked Hokuto versus Kazama 93 hair match. But, this is that's a very famous match as well, so I'm not really surprised that won Match of the Year. I would bet this finished second. I don't know that because
it finished. So I've got the old Mookie Chris Harrington list up here. So this match finished 4th.
Wow.
Ahead of it is a Rey Mysterio versus Psychosis match. It's in Philadelphia, so that's got to be ECW on October 7th, 1995. Ahead of that, in number 2 is Shawn Michaels Razor Ramon at SummerSlam ladder match rematch, and then number 1, as you mentioned, is Minami Toyota and Kyoko Inoue.
Yeah, I guess I'm not surprised by the HBK Razor Ramon ladder match, but I'm surprised that maybe Mysterio Psychosis match. But anyway,
it's 95, so there's probably a little bit more U.S. readership, or there's probably just more readers or voters who are not getting Japanese tapes, I would guess.
Yeah, I mean, Japan did really well in the 90s in that award, but that's probably true. Because you look at if you look at the 90s.
Well, then again, Minami Toyota and Kyoko Inoue won the award, so that kind of invalidates that. Okay.
Yeah, because the following year will be won by an All Japan Tag match, Masao and Akiyama against Steve Williams and Johnny Ace.
Yeah,
and then
so like the big famous match from '96 to me is the Akiyama and Masao versus Taue and Kawada tag league final.
Yeah.
But that's actually counting in 97, I forgot, because of the weird Observer calendar.
Yeah.
Which he needs to stop doing. He still does that.
No, he doesn't. He changed it finally.
Oh, he stopped doing it.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, then Kobashi Masawa wins in 98 and 99. But yeah, I mean, I think Puro has dominated this awards overall. There was a long stretch where no Puro match won, but if you look at that stretch, it's from 05 through 2011, but then the 05, 06, and 07 matches are all Ring of Honor matches that have Japanese wrestlers in them. It's right. Kobashi versus Joe, the famous Dragon Gate 6-man, and Morishima versus Danielson. So I don't know if you could even really. I mean, it's America, but it's it's really both. But then WWE had that 4-year run where they won with Jericho Shawn ladder match, 2 years in a row, Undertaker Shawn and Punk Cena, and then you get into the run where New Japan's won every year since 2012. So that'd be a fun trivia. Do you remember the matches that won every year? You said you used to remember this stuff.
Sorry, do you remember what?
The NJPW matches.
You could.
Oh, cut
the
out.
New Japan. Starting what year?
20 from when they started winning in 2012.
2012. Oh, they start. Okay, 2012 is that Minoru Suzuki and Tanahashi.
Yeah. King of Pro Wrestling.
13 is that Shibata and Ishii?
No, 13 is Tanahashi Okada Invasion Attack, which I can't blame them on that one. That's their best match. So
okay. 14 is that Tanahashi and Okada in the Tokyo Dome?
Nope, it's AJ and Minoru Suzuki.
Oh, right. Because I think I voted for that. Okay. 15. That and Tanahashi in the Tokyo Dome, right?
No, 15 is Nakamura Ibushi.
Okay, right. Yep. I'm doing terribly here. 16. That's got to be Okada. And
Tanahashi that is Okada Tanahashi.
Well, they had so many in the Tokyo Dome. So 18.
Well, 17.
18. 17. 17 is it Kenny Omega and Okada?
Yes. Which one?
But which one? Dominion?
Nope, it's the Tokyo Dome.
the Tokyo Dome.
Which I agree with as their best of those three that year. I don't agree that's the 2017 match of the year. It's 2017 match of the year is something else, but I don't even remember what I voted for. But yeah, it's that's definitely the best of the three, I think. But yeah,
19.
Well, 18.
18. Did Omega and Okada have a match in 18?
Yeah, the 2 out of 3 Falls Dominion.
And that's the match of the year, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then 19 is that... It's not Ospreay and Shingo, is it?
It is, yep.
It is, okay.
Yeah. So that's the big New Japan run. Going to rebrand as a trivia podcast. But yeah, there's only 2 other ones on the Voice of Wrestling Network. But yeah, that's a fun little run, right? Now here's a great question: will they make it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6? Will they make it 9 in a row this year? Because they've been shut down for so long. But on the other hand, they already have some really strong contenders.
Probably, because you figure they're probably going to have more. Japan's probably going to have more time with fans in attendance than the U.S. will, and Japan is already seeming to be in an advantage anyway with this population of voters, right? Yeah. So, I mean, like who would beat them out? Like NXT seems to have diminished in its reception in the last little while, and W main roster can't touch it.
I think it's just AEW.
Yeah, I suppose.
So I think because if you held it right now, I think either Okada Naito, Okada Ibushi, or the tag match you just mentioned, the Bucks against Omega and Page. I think one of those 3 would win sure.
That's true.
The only thing would be if those 2 Wrestle Kingdom main events might split the vote, kind of. But yeah, then there's, like you're saying, there's still probably going to be time for them to have something else. But I guess we'll see. I mean, if I had to guess right now, I would guess Okada.
We've got ranked voting in the Wrestling Observer.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but fortunately, the Wrestling Observer has ranked voting, unlike U.S. elections. So I think the splitting of the vote is not as much of a risk.
That's true. I mean, there are some people that might not just that might only vote for one of them because they want to bounce their ballot, But,
yeah.
But anyway, I forget. So we were just introducing this match still, which was obviously Kawada and Taue against Misawa and Kobashi.
I also just noticed that when I sat down to watch these matches this afternoon, that there's 3 Toshiaki Kawada matches here.
Yeah. Well, you picked 2 of them, and I was like,
I did.
I might as well just join the party.
Yeah. It is true that Kawada. People will sometimes ask me, "Who's your favorite wrestler?" I'm like, "Man, I don't know. I guess Kawada. Probably Kawada." Yeah.
Kawada. See, he was never my favorite when I first started watching Japanese wrestling. I always liked Misawa and Kobashi and even Akiyama better, but he's still. I mean, what am I going? I'm going to sit here and tell you Kawada's not good. I mean, he's awesome. But
it took me a little while to like him as much as I came to like him. Because I think it kind of ties into what we can talk about while going through these matches here. Is I think the most interesting story to me in like wrestling history is the story of Kawada and Misawa, and a big focal point of it is this match where it's 1995 and Kawada and Misawa are on opposite teams, and some people probably know that Kawada and Misawa had been high school wrestling teammates. Like Misawa was a year older, so they had gone to the same high school. They had been on the same wrestling team, and they had known each other since that time. They were tag partners in the early '90s, and they won the titles, and they had a successful run. And then they split off. Misawa taking Kobashi as his partner, and Kawada taking Taue as his partner. And it's June 9th, 1995, and Kawada still has never scored a pinfall against Misawa. So it's not just that Kawada has never beaten Misawa in a singles match, which is also true, but he's never pinned him in any sort of tag match at all.
Right. And, I mean, their relationship is so interesting because I almost think you might not get it all the way unless you understand, like, how important seniority is in, like, Japanese society. And, like, they always had that, Misawa was always his senpai, was basically the thing.
Yeah.
And, like, that is a very interesting dynamic with the 2 of them and how they became, such enormous rivals throughout the entire 90s in all Japan. And, by the end of it, they were such bitter rivals that Kawada wouldn't even go with him to Noah. And, it spilled into real life. And I don't think people quite realize, Kawada basically always felt like a little brother is the easiest way to put it, I think, And it's like, it very much, he felt that way because that's what the original relationship was in school, and he felt that way because that's what the relationship was essentially in All Japan. So,
and like some of this is, I mean, in Japan, especially this time, there isn't like storyline, even to the extent that I think there is in New Japan, modern days. There's just sort of matches, and there's really sort of subtle, the more you invest in, the more time you spend watching and understanding what the dynamics are, the more rewarding it is, and the more you like get what the stories are. But there's a lot of real life stuff besides the the wrestling part of it in that, and I just don't know what the answers are. I mean, maybe you do, John, but the most interesting autobiography I wish I'd read, and I don't know if he's even written one, is Kawada's. If he has written one, it's probably in Japanese, right? And has been translated to English. I'm so curious about what their relationship was, like what led to, Misawa in the year 2000, obviously he splits off from All Japan and decides to form Noah, but Kawada, along with Fuchi and the referee Kyo Kawada, are the only Japanese who are left behind. And I'm so curious about like what was the relationship and why was there such a rift there? Why was there such a problem where they apparently by 2000, hated each other?
Yeah, everything I've heard is that hate is a strong word, but like they just, he always just felt like I said, like a big brother, little brother kind of thing, and they did kind of reconcile later on because Kawada did come into Noah for that little run. But yeah, I mean, it was a very strained relationship by the end, for sure.
Maybe it's like people would always compare it to like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, I don't think it was ever that. From everything I've read and heard, I don't think it was that they ever really reached that amount of animosity.
They never had a pull apart brawl where Kawada came away with a handful of Misawa's hair.
Yeah, nothing like that. And by the way, he does have a Japanese autobiography.
Does he?
Yeah, it was written in 2003. Wow. It's called Dangerous K. Obviously.
Oh wow! It was written in 2003.
Yeah, in Japanese.
Yeah. I've seen some translated quotes from him. Just like I think there's a obviously there's like a Misawa bot Twitter. I don't know if you know about that one. I think that's pretty cool. Where like there's all these quotes from Misawa, and fortunately with Twitter you can hit the translate button. You can see sort of a translated version of what he's saying. But I saw a quote translated by someone I think on Twitter where Kawada. This is after Misawa has passed away, and it's sort of after Kawada has stopped wrestling. Where apparently Kawada says something to the effect of, he felt so bonded to Misawa, I guess, even though they were apart for all those years after 2000. But he felt such a reason for being just through Misawa also being there in the industry. So after Misawa died, Kawada said something to the effect of that he felt like he didn't have as much of a reason to wrestle anymore. And Kawada doesn't have like a spectacular retirement or anything. He doesn't have a retirement match or retirement ceremony as far as I'm aware. He just sort of quietly stops wrestling in about, is it like 2012 or something like that?
I think it's earlier than that. I think it's 2010. It's like really, It's really soon after Misawa dies, I believe. Let me just double check it. I was just looking at it the other day.
Yeah. Misawa dies in what, June 2009, right?
Yeah, 2009. And then let me just double check this. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong, but I think it's pretty early. Okay. Cage match once.
And Misawa, of course, passes away after taking a back suplex in a. Basically, was it a TV or a house show? Because I've seen the footage where it's after it's happened.
I think it's a house show. I think so.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's August 15th, 2010. And that's his
last match.
It's his last match. It's a New Japan show of all things. It's Genusho Tenryu, Tiger Mask, and Kawada beating Akira, Riki Choshu, and Super Strong Machine. So 8 minutes long, 6-man tag. So
wow.
But he was in the 2010. It was like his last big Noah run, where he's in the Global League earlier that year. So he's like, that's basically it for him after that. And then he does some more Noah shows in July, and he does that one New Japan date, which is I guess the G1 final, probably. It's G1 Night 8 in Sumo Hall. And then that's it. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, he was already out of All Japan by that point. Like, if you look at his last All Japan date is like April 2008, where he does the Champion Carnival, and then he's gone, and he's in Hustle. He does the G1 in 2008, which I remember people being kind of disappointed by. And then he does Lock Up for Riki Choshu. And he's 0-1 World Heavyweight Champion 2010, weirdly, which I always forget he had that title. and that's pretty much it. So, but yeah, so it's not definitely he retired. Like, yeah, that quote is very very poignant, I guess, because he did retire like a year after Misawa died. It looks like so. But yeah, I guess back to what you're talking about, like the internal stories of these matches and stuff. Like, these stories aren't hard to follow, but like I do think like having a little bit of that knowledge going in just adds a ton to the match. You can look at the story here twofold. I mean, first of all, like you said, Kawada has never pinned Misawa. That's the big story. The other part of it is, if you notice, like Taue is like extra grumpy in this match. He's very mad because he lost to Misawa in the Champion Carnival final in April.
Right.
So like he was like on like kind of a little mini rampage after that. So that's kind of why he went like, I mean, Kawada and Taue are like, even though what you're saying is true, like, there's less stories and stuff, they are unquestionably the heels of this match. I mean, they work this match as complete heels, and they're, they work over. Misawa has a broken orbital bone, which was given to him by Kawada, and Kobashi
in this match.
No, but going into this match.
Okay.
But Kawada targets that, throughout the match, which is almost like an extra fuck you, because it's like, well, I'm the one who gave this to you, so I'm going to keep going after it too. And Kobashi has the taped up knee, which I think that's very obvious, I think, to anyone watching. But yeah, so Misawa and Kobashi are the reigning tag champions here. Misawa has also won the Triple Crown title for the second time from Stan Hansen a month earlier, which I guess you could argue made this result not really in doubt, because so the way All Japan always used the tag titles is they used it as the way New Japan would use the Intercontinental, right? As like a secondary drawing title that could main event big shows.
So I think this is one of the last times that title main events Budokan. I think maybe the match that we mentioned in 96, that 6-7 96 with Johnny Ace and Steve Williams against Misawa and Akiyama, that might have been the main event also. But yeah, it was often a main event, the tag title match.
Yeah. So it was kind of, I think, almost like, okay, well, of course Misawa's not going to hold the tag titles for much longer when he just won the Triple Crown. So you could argue that the result was kind of a given here, but the crowd did not seem to think so. The crowd was like obviously going completely crazy. I mean, one of the things that really stands out about this match is it's 42 minutes long, and this crowd is up for like all 42 minutes. And I kind of wanted to ask you, like, as a wrestler, like, can you imagine just working in front of a crowd like this hot for this sustained amount of time, to the point where like everything you're doing, and obviously these four are the greatest of all time, so I'm not trying to take away from like their their contribution to the crowd being that hot, but the crowd also just already cares so much about these four guys, like on a level that crowds do not generally care about professional wrestlers. That like it must be can you imagine what it'd be like to wrestle in front of a crowd like that?
Yeah. So like I'm such a mark for the Budokan, especially All Japan Wrestling at the Budokan in the 90s. Like, that's my favorite era of wrestling. That's I guess that's why I picked this as sort of the exemplar match for that era. I'm such a fan of this stuff and this time that I at one point on eBay I found, and it is now hanging on my wall, the program for the June 8, 1990 Budokan card with, of course, that has the Misawa and Jumbo match where Misawa upsets Jumbo and basically starts this era of wrestling. And but I think what makes this match so over with this crowd, it's not just, of course, the execution of these four wrestlers having the great match, but it's the stage that's set for them by everything that precedes this, and sort of the booking, these guys being protected and built up as stars, and especially the feud between Misawa and Kawada, in my view, of having this huge rivalry, and even the stuff with Kobashi, and there's great tag matches between this pair of teams before this, and I think it's December 3rd, 1993, with their World Tag League match, and is it May 21st, 1994, where they have another world title match where Kobashi, in both of those matches, Kobashi gets the pin. So it's sort of, even, Misawa's partner is pinning both of these guys. But yeah, I just think it's the overall booking that really is a symbiotic thing that makes this match as great as it is. As great as the execution may be in this match, and as great as the performances, bell to bell may be, what really helps it is that there's a strong creative vision that makes people emotionally invested in what's about to happen. I think I've heard people say, once you're over, you can kind of break all the rules. We train people on there's certain things you're supposed to do and some certain things you're not supposed to do. But once you're over, you can kind of break the rules more and you can kind of experiment more. People who are super over could almost break all the rules, and it's okay because they've already gotten over. And a lot of times the trick that we're trying to do is to get over in the first place, to make people care about us. There are occasions where people have matches who nobody knows who these people are at the beginning of it, and by the time it's over, they're over and people care about them. But that's a harder thing to do than, I think every wrestler kind of wishes to be in the sort of situation that, in a situation like this where you're going into the main event of a hot crowd, 16,000 people. Maybe it's 14, as we've heard. Maybe these numbers are somewhat exaggerated. We've learned, but yeah. But anyway, a hot crowd, and it's probably sold out, and people perceive all of the players here as just huge stars, and that's when you can execute something that is really special and really dramatic and really emotional.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote down so many spots for this match, but like a great example of what you're talking about is like really like almost right at the start, Kawada, takes the opportunity to boot Misawa off the apron when he started in the ring with Kobashi, and this crowd reacts like they just saw the fucking Kennedy assassination. They're like, they fucking freak out, and they're like, everybody gasps, and like all he did was boot this man off the apron, but like the crowd just like completely loses their mind over this, and it's all the wrestlers also just treat it like like how dare you, basically it's that reaction, and it's really like something. And then when Misawa tags in right after, the crowd just goes completely nuts for that, and after they have a fun little exchange, Kawada boots Kobashi off the apron, and then everybody gets in the ring, and that brings Taui in the ring too. And there's like this really tense standoff, and you just feel like that of that moment of like there's so much like drama here, and there's already so much history between these four guys that like even the most minor thing is just such a big deal to this crowd.
Right, and I think another thing that stands out in this match is just how versatile tag wrestling is. Like obviously economically, the thing that people really care about, especially in the U.S. in the last few decades, and I think especially in Northeast wrestling, and there's in the territory days in the South, I think it's a little bit different where tag wrestling gets more featured, but and earlier in the period just before this in Japan, and like we were saying, this is kind of the last time I think that one of the last times anyway that a big tag match main events in the Budokan. But anyway, my point is there's so much more dramatic options and dramatic tools in a tag match just because you have sort of this theatrical ability to make people enter and exit and to do things like you just mentioned where Kawada just, unsuspectingly kicks Kobashi in the face and knocks him off the apron. And you have this great moment where Kobashi has this to me, is a really memorable facial expression where he sort of like puts his hand to his mouth and has this like look of disgust, like how offended he is at the fact that Kawada, just kicked him in the face, and Kawada, of course, just stares at him blankly, I think when people talk about Kawada being like stoic or he has no emotion, I think that's kind of like a superficial reading of what he does. And I think you would think that after seeing only a couple Kawada matches. But the great thing about All Japan in the 90s is the more you watch this stuff, the more you're able to appreciate things, the more of a wider view you have of what's going on, what everything means. So what I'm trying to say is Kawada, I think, is just very efficient with his facial expressions or emotional expression, where a very little amount means a lot, or even not having an expression seems like cold and like, I don't fucking care, fuck you. It sort of says words to you with a simple expression or almost no expression.
Right. So one of my favorite sequences of all time happens very, very early as well, and you have to give almost as much credit to the production people in the sequence as you do the wrestlers, because man, they hit these camera angles amazing during this. So Misawa fakes out that he's going to do a dive on Taue.
Yeah.
He stops on the apron. He flips backwards, and at the same time he flips backwards to the ring, Kobashi does a shoulder block on on Taue from the apron to the floor, and then Misawa back in the ring, elbows Kawada down when he rushes him, and then does a dive on Taue on the floor. So the production team, they pick like the perfect like diagonal camera angle to catch all of this action at once. And I feel like this is something a lot of modern wrestling is terrible at. Like they're really awful at capturing multiple multiple things going on at once, like multiple like little fights or little exchanges at the same time. Like I feel like you always end up missing one or the other because everybody's always like they're so focused on zooming in that you always miss one or the other. So,
and then, like the shot that you're talking about, like if people can imagine, basically if you haven't seen this match, it's basically I don't know where the camera really is, but it looks like it's shooting down from the balcony.
Yeah.
It's not quite a bird's eye. Like later, I've seen like in '99 they have like this bird's eye, or even in the early '90s I think they have this straight down shot on the ring. But this is like like you said, it's on the corner and it's sort of on a 45-degree angle looking down on the ring, and you just see Misawa float all over the ring and do the spot that you just described. It's amazing.
It makes me really wonder why the hell no one does this camera angle anymore. Like Japan doesn't do it either. I don't like New Japan doesn't do this or All Japan. But yeah, I mean it's what it's almost like. It's almost like the Fire Pro Wrestling camera angle.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's a good way to put it.
Yeah. But it's a really good job by the production team. After that, Kawada starts like really punishing Kobashi's bandaged leg, and that will become a theme throughout. And I don't think, again, not breaking any news to say that Kenta Kobashi is really good at selling, but he is really fucking good at selling in this match. But yeah, I mean, just his faces and everything, it just makes you, really feel like you can really feel his pain, basically, which I guess is the entire idea. But yeah, so I'm just scrolling through all my notes here because I made so many. Like there's one spot where like Kawada goes really hard at Misawa and his broken orbital bone in the corner, and the crowd gets really mad about this, and like they're really fucking pissed. And I assume that part of it isn't just like, oh, he's not giving a break. Like part of it is they know that he has this broken orbital bone from Kawada, and they're like really fucking furious about it. But yeah, like it's all just like very, I don't know how else to put it, but like very raw and like very heated, and like it doesn't feel, like corny wrestling anger the way a lot of wrestling nowadays can sort of feel. Like it just feels very much like these people really want to be each other's asses. So
yeah. No, I don't want to sound like some kind of like purist on like only Japanese wrestling is the best, but like there's so much of it that appeals to me just because it's understated and it's not I guess like what Joe Lanza would call the subtlety hammer, where they're like pounding it home so you can't possibly miss it. It's just a different approach to wrestling where they sort of expect the audience to know certain things, where I think in U.S. wrestling and U.S. influenced wrestling, there's always this fear that, well, what if somebody's watching for the first time? We have to make everything super obvious.
If there's ever any podcast where you don't have to worry about offending anybody by saying Japanese wrestling is the best, you're on the right one, sir. Don't worry. But yes, you wouldn't be the first person to express that viewpoint. But at one point, Taue like tosses Misawa down onto Kobashi's leg with like a sort of like STO, and it's like that looks so badass, and it's like again not a spot you really see anymore. And it's just one of those things where there's a lot of spots. The more I do this project of like watching older matches and a lot of random like really high level matches, I'm like, why are wrestlers not stealing some of these spots? I don't understand. But yeah.
Like I guess I can tell you this. Like there's a match I had I think last year September. It feels like so long ago, right? Because there's all this shit has happened since then. Yeah. I think it's last year September. For Empire State Wrestling, where I have like a Butcher and the Blade versus me and Daniel Garcia, where like I stole some of this stuff here that I remember from this match, but just stuff like getting peeled away, sort of jumping ahead, but where towards the end where Kawada and Taue just peel Kobashi away from Misawa. There's all this great imagery of like I think there's. Like one possible reading of this match is just thinking about the relationships between the partners, where Kobashi and the structure, by the way, let me say this first, like the structure of this match is very different from what a typical U.S. tag wrestling structure is, as far as I was taught. You do a shine, babyfaces, bump everybody around, then they get cut off, then there's a heat, and there's all this keep away, and then there's hot tag, and all this happens, right? there's sort of it almost feels like the mission is to fuck up Misawa and make sure Kawada gets his first ever pin that he's been chasing for all these years. And there's all this sacrifice and desperate, Kobashi trying to save Misawa, and Kawada and Toei making sure that Kobashi's knee is destroyed so that he can't save Misawa. So there's kind of a heat on Kobashi. There's all this sympathy and all this pain put on Kobashi so that he can't make the save, as opposed to putting the heat on the person who's legal and in the ring and building up to this big hot tag.
Yeah,
it's just a different sort of structure there. But yeah, I think there's all this stuff sort of playing out in terms of the relationship between the partners, where again Kobashi is trying to save Misawa, and just literally there's three amazing moments there's three of the most amazing and memorable moments to me as a wrestling viewer, of Kobashi just laying his body over Misawa as he's getting stomped by the other guys and holding on to his leg as he gets power bombed. And then there's all this action where Toei, comes in there to counteract Kobashi and just fucking kill him. The moment that you mentioned a minute ago, where he grabs Misawa or grabs Kobashi by the neck and sort of gives him the Nodoa. It's not actually a chokeslam where he picks him up, but he just kind of shoves him down. Maybe confusing that. But
yeah.
The point is, Toei gets in there and just fucks up Kobashi all the time to try to leave Kawada and Misawa alone so he can finish them off.
Yeah. Kobashi's, like I said, his selling was so amazing, and he does a really incredible job, staggering around on one leg and still having an awesome match. And I feel like one of the defenses you hear over and over again of bad leg selling nowadays is the match quality would be hurt if they didn't sell the leg, if they sold the leg, completely consistently, or they can't get their shit in. And it's well, you need to watch some Kenta Kobashi. I don't know what to tell you. There's plenty of ways to do wrestling moves where you're still being, you're still selling the leg. These guys that completely shrug it off and then get back to it when, not that this is a Japanese versus America thing. There's plenty of Japanese wrestlers who do this nowadays too, and that it's very annoying for me as a viewer. But I'm sure it is very hard. I don't know if the last time you've tried to do a leg selling match. I'm sure it is one of the hardest things to do in wrestling. But many people are bad at it nowadays. Is my point.
Yeah. Sometimes it'll come up as you think I should work over the leg, and somebody will be well, I think that shuts down on my offense. I don't know. It is something that comes up and that I try to advise people about, and that at a certain point, if you're trying to get over on the indies and on the super indies, or the super fans are watching, you will be wrestling before at least a part of the audience that will really care about that. And in a wrestling world where maybe your internet buzz and how much everybody agrees that you're an awesome wrestler kind of matters, or matters in certain situations, that there will be certain fans who will pay attention to that, and there will be certain fans who will really appreciate that if you do that well. But I think the overriding measurement is does the match get over? Does the match get over, first of all, with the crowd, and does the match get over with the people who are watching it? So, I mean, whatever satisfies that,
right?
That condition, I think, is generally you've met the requirement of what you were supposed to do in that match.
Right, being a huge nerd who breaks stuff down on the podcast can't be the target audience. Otherwise, it's no. I mean, you have to There's plenty of matches that get over in the building that I can't stand. So it's very much a separate thing, right? And it's you're always gonna have different nerds who have different tastes, and some. I happen to be a nerd that cares a lot about leg selling, but there might be another nerd who's there's these people who are really into the quality of punches and stuff. So you're never gonna you're never gonna get approval from all these different types of people simultaneously. So you have to go for whatever crowd you're in front of at that point.
Yeah, but we should try to satisfy everybody as much as possible. I think it's just really easy to get into this mentality of dismiss all these fucking marks who have these criticisms. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. But there's I think you want to try to satisfy everybody as much as possible, or at least I think the thing that's happening for some people who have those criticisms, if they are genuine, is that the suspension of disbelief is being broken for them. And that's one of the keys to making emotional connections, I think, is that our job is to help people, to put on something dramatic and emotionally engaging, but then to preserve this suspension of disbelief so that people can be emotionally engaged in it. And if you're breaking people's suspension of disbelief, you're breaking their ability to have that connection.
Right. That's a great way to put it. But yeah, I guess back to this match in particular. Let me see. There's so much stuff, like you said, towards the end, but there's like this. I guess towards the very end, there's like this really badass double spot of like a Nodora Toshi and power bomb simultaneously that Misawa still kicks out of. And
do you know Japanese? You study Japanese, haven't you?
So do I know Japanese? No. Am I studying Japanese? Yes. That's the answer.
I know what I've watched this match like probably dozens of times, but what I noticed for the first time when I watched this is where they do that the back suplex chokeslam combo. The commentator calls it the something 95, the something special 95. Did you catch that?
No, I didn't catch it.
I've never known that move to have one of those. Obviously there's like the Tiger Driver 91, there's the Tiger Suplex 85.
Yeah,
but he called it the something 95.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't catch that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't speak Japanese, but I try to pronounce the words that the way there's.
I know a very little bit. Like I guess I caught that he said what however you say it's like, I don't know, 95. I just noticed it. It's ku something.
It'd be kuju go.
Yeah. Something like that.
But yeah, I'm studying it. It's very difficult. So people always ask me, like, I remember Rich from when I first started studying it, or like was 6 months in, like Rich from the Voice of Wrestling flagship was like, "Hey, I've been thinking of studying it. Should I, what's an easy way to study?" I'm like, there is no easy way to study it. It is a lot of work to even get to what I would call I always joke, like a second grade level. So
yeah,
I
got to the point where like I can read most katakana, and I can because the nice thing about that is like it's usually referencing originally English words, right? So
yeah, or European, but yeah,
and I can recognize some names in kanji.
Yeah, so the reading to me is actually the easiest part, and it's weird because for a lot of people it's very difficult, but I have a very easy time memorizing kanji and stuff. I think I'm up to like 500 or something, but the hardest part for me is like the speech, and like not even just speaking, but also like being able to listen and like figure out what they're saying, especially when they talk very quickly. So that's basically been my hardest part. But like as far as like reading and writing, I'm a lot further ahead of that than I am with like speaking. So yeah, I guess it's just different people learn different things.
This reminds me of a story. So we were talking, I think this was before we started recording. Were we recording already? Yes, we were. Where we were talking about George Mayfield.
Yeah. At
the same after party bar, probably a different after party of a different event. But anyway, Kudo, right? Is that his name?
Yeah,
from the DDT wrestler.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he was wrestling for this promotion in Rochester, and like he was like a Japanese guy who was like kind of alone, and so like I don't know, I think one of my friends is also a wrestler, doesn't wrestle anymore. Like we sort of like tried to make friends with him, and I was like showing off to him that like I knew how to write pro wrestling in katakana. So. And then like I think we wrote down swear words to each other, and he was teaching me something, some sort of Japanese swear words or something. I don't remember.
It's funny, but yeah, it's a very difficult language. It's funny that the one that I struggle the most with reading weirdly is katakana. I don't know why, but
really?
like the hiragana very easy, kanji very easy, but katakana I always get them confused. I no real idea. Like some of them look so fucking similar. That I always get like the soul and the N confused and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true. Well, there's like we're really engaging now. We're talking about how to write. Yeah, but it's like the little dot is lower on the N and it starts up high on the so. Yeah.
So it's like very. I don't know why I found that one annoying. Whereas like one of my best friends is like the exact opposite, where he learned the katakana first and he like can read that perfectly, but he can never keep the hiragana consistent, and I'm like, no, hiragana is really easy. I don't know what you're talking about. It's katakana with all those like weird like sharp lines that like annoys me.
I think there was a time where I knew hiragana better, but yeah, I think just the usefulness of deciphering the katakana on the screen and always having like a wrestler there whose name I knew, so I could be like, it's Carl Anderson or whatever,
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I could usually get it up for the wrestler names because once you like you start sounding it out and then like you're like Zack Sabre Jr. like stuff like
exactly.
that. But and people who don't like study Japanese probably think I'm being offensive, but that's like how you should read an English name written in Japanese, like you should read the Japanese sounds. That's why when they announce Zack Sabre Jr., they're not just doing that for fun. Like they're basically reading Zack Sabre Jr.'s name in katakana, like Zaku.
Yeah.
But,
because they don't with the exception of the letter N, they don't end their words in consonants, really, right?
Yeah.
It's all vowel sounds at the end of it.
Yeah, N would be the
syllables.
only one. Yeah. So anything else. And even that I think is pretty rare. I don't think it has its own, it's the only one that that's a consonant by like as its own character, but I don't think they really end many words with it anyway.
Well, like Triple Crown is Sankan, right? So that ends in an N, I guess.
You're right. I don't know, and then like
I'm showing off with my Japanese,
and like Gai Kokujin and stuff like that. Yeah, now that I say it out loud, you're correct. But yeah, there's no other character that ends with like that's just a consonant. So anyway, nobody cares. So let's keep going. The next, because I've done the Japanese language stuff before, and I think people's ears glaze over. That's not really a thing, but. We were talking about that double move. That's what we got on that. And I like that after Misawa kicks out, Kawada has really had enough at this point, and he just starts stomping on his fucking face. And he's so angry that this man dared to kick out of that double team move. And that's for Kobashi. I mean, you talked about it. This is the second time he does it, but he throws himself on top of Misawa to try and protect him. And that leads to them whipping his ass and giving him the combo backdrop no dawa.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so which is another really cool combo move. And then Misawa tries to fight back himself. He does succeed in taking out Taue with the roaring elbow, but then walks right into the enziguri from Kawada, and he kicks out again, which the crowd can't believe it. So Kawada, he gives Misawa a really sick backdrop, and that only gets two. Hits yet another enziguri, and then another power bomb. And that finally gets the pin while Kobashi is you see him trying to crawl over while Taue holds him back. One of the great all-time failed saves in wrestling history. And there you go. Kawada has finally pinned Misawa. It sets up another Triple Crown challenge for Kawada the following month at Budokan. He was not successful. He lost there. He doesn't beat... Does he beat Misawa before the 98 Tokyo Dome match in a singles match? I don't think he does.
So, in the 97...
Oh, Champion Carnival.
Champion Carnival.
Okay.
The Champion Carnival, there's a three-way tie between Misawa, Kawada, and Kobashi. And so the Budokan final, rather than being a singles match, is like a round robin. And so Misawa and Kobashi have a match, and it's a 30-minute draw. And Misawa has to wrestle Kawada immediately. Kawada comes out and fucking kills him in 6 minutes.
Oh yeah, that's
and
right.
That's his first singles win, I guess.
So the 98 one is the 98 is the quote unquote first real one.
It's the first in the Tokyo Dome,
Yeah. So there you go. But this is the first pinfall. I mean, this is where I would give a star rating. I don't know if you're a star rating guy, but it's obviously 5 stars. I don't know. It's not really a difficult call. I think it's still the best tag team match I've ever seen. I can't think of a better one.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess you got to measure the endorphins in your brain. We need to do an experiment where you have people watch certain wrestling matches and measure the oxytocin or the endorphins or something, some sort of chemicals in people's brains to see what they describe as 5 stars and how much how many chemicals they're having in their brain at that time. But yeah, I don't know. It just depends on I don't know, from any given viewing. I think the 12-6-96 tag match is awesome too, and it's right up there with this one.
All right, so let's transition over to my first pick, and I'm going to have to go short on each match because we went a long time on that one.
Yeah, we did. Holy shit.
Toshiaki Kawada versus Shinya Hashimoto from All Japan, February 22nd, 2004. I just kind of thought of this one in my head when you had sent me your 2 picks of the Kawada matches. And, I just kind of thought, like, hey, it'd be fun to relive this one because I don't really remember it that well. But it's a really interesting match because you basically have... First of all, I guess before I even introduce it, had you ever seen this before or no?
It's really good that you picked this because I bet this is a match that I have on VHS that I never got around to watching.
Ah, there you go.
and that I watched for the first time probably today. So yeah, I definitely don't remember watching it.
Okay, and it's a very interesting match because you're basically talking like two of the absolute biggest stars of the '90s, right? I mean, you have Kawada in All Japan, Hashimoto from New Japan, that had never met in a singles match, and here they both are like clearly on the downside of their careers. I mean, poor Hashimoto would be dead in a year, unfortunately. I mean, this is like very close to the end for him. I mean, he wrestles through. Let me see. I wrote it down. So he wrestles through August 04. So he wrestles about 6 months after this, and after that he takes time off because he's got as you can see, the giant taped up shoulder here. He's trying to heal that injury, and he had stepped down of 01, and the rumor was he was going to try to make a return to New Japan, and that would have been really interesting. Hashimoto back in New Japan 2005 with all the turmoil that company was going through. But I mean, he passed away of a brain aneurysm during training, so he never got to make that comeback. But yeah, I mean, this is basically Hashimoto getting his chance to win back the Triple Crown after he never lost it. He won it from Great Muta on February 23rd, 2003. He made 2 successful defenses, and then he had to vacate the title later that summer due to a knee injury. And then Kawada won the vacant title from beating another 01 wrestler, Shinjiro Otani, in a tournament final on September 6, 2003. So basically, it's like Hashimoto is now facing the current champion to try to get the belts back he never lost. This is the other interesting thing about this is during the Kawada. I mean, Kawada never got a big Triple Crown reign until this, right? I mean, if you look at his Triple Crown reigns, they were all super short. I mean, he has 4 months, 4 months from late '94 into early '95. The infamous 1 month reign where he beats Misawa at the Tokyo Dome, like we just talked about, and then like in '98, and whether this was the plan or not, they put the belt on Kobashi a month later. Rumor has it because the house show business tanked after Kawada beat. Yes. Oh wow. Yeah. So Kawada beats Misawa, and the house show business goes in the toilet. I mean, there's a lot in the Observer at the time about this, but like it really crashes, and they. No one really knows if they had always planned to put the title on Kobashi the following month or if that was a panic change because the business was so bad. But I think most people think it was the latter, so that's always interesting. And then after that, his next 2 reigns, he beats Misawa in January '99, but he had to immediately vacate the title because he broke his arm during that match. And then, the Noah split happens. Right. The Noah split happens, and you're thinking, okay, well, he's finally going to get his big reign now. There's no one here. But he doesn't win the title until February 2002, so almost 2 years later. And then he has to vacate the belt again after yet another injury in just a month without a successful defense. So this is his 5th reign, and at this point he's had, I think, like 1 successful defense. I don't remember if it was 1 or 2 in that.
So did you mention the '95 reign? He beats in '94, in October '94, he beats Steve Williams, and he has a title defense against Kobashi on January 19, '95, an hour draw, so it doesn't even pin him, and then drops it to Hansen on March 4th. I'm so proud of myself that I know all these dates. On March 4th, 1995, he drops it to Hansen, who then drops it to Misawa.
Right. So, like the '94, I did mention '94 and '95, and I couldn't remember if it was 1 defense or 2 defenses, but that's a great point. I totally forgot. It's not even he hasn't beaten anyone to retain this title at this point. It was the 1 hour draw. But yeah, so then he wins it in 2003. Doesn't even beat anybody for it because it was like we just said, the belt was vacated after Hashimoto got injured. I would imagine he was supposed to beat Hashimoto. That probably was what was supposed to happen because he beats him here anyway. So it's like, they probably negotiated that with Hashimoto. Like, you come in, because he was still 0-1 at this point. So it's like, you come in to All Japan, we'll give you the Triple Crown, but then you have to put Kawada over. But yeah, so he basically... But this was finally that big epic title reign. I mean, he holds it for 17 months. He sets the record for the most title defenses in one reign with 10, which was the record that Kento Miyahara recently tied but was not able to break. Suwama beat him on that 11th defense attempt. But yeah, so that's after all this time, and during this period where like All Japan is not doing too hot. That's Kawada's final, like his final reign is finally his epic reign. So
right, I wrote in my notes here. This the unheralded tragedy of Toshiaki Kawada is just he never really gets that time to be the top star of the company. It's always Misawa overshadowing him, and it's all these short runs that are either shortened by booking decisions or shortened by injuries. And even after Misawa's out of the damn company, he finally beats Muto for the title, but then he gets injured a couple months later. And by the time he finally does have his like epic run as the champion, it's the business is like a fraction of what it had been in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, it's the weird like Muto era of All Japan that like I feel like some people really like it, but the people that do are very like I feel like few and far between. Because this is sorry, go ahead.
And this is the Budokan, right? And I think I looked it up. This is the last All Japan show at the Budokan.
Oh, wow. I didn't even notice that.
And it's just a stark contrast to watch this. I watched this consecutively after I watched the tag match that we just talked about. And
it looks so different.
Right. It's this white ring that's just full of sponsors, where we had been watching this pretty plain blue ring and Giant Baba's pure, basic, fundamentalist All Japan Pro Wrestling. It's interesting.
And like the video screen makes it look weirder too.
Yeah.
And, like the camera angles are different. It looks like a totally different building. But yeah, it's just a weird era of All Japan where like I remember, as a fan online at the time, there weren't that many All Japan devotees, I mean, it was like Noah was super popular and Toryumon / Dragon Gate was super popular, and New Japan, even though that's not considered a great period historically, they still had a lot of defenders online. I mean, like the Strong Style Spirit people and stuff. So they had a lot of fans online, even on the Western sphere of what little of it existed at the time. But All Japan, like that's one of the ones that like no one talked about, and like occasionally someone would be like, "Hey, All Japan," basically. But like it felt like no one really talked or cared about All Japan as a Western Puro fan at the time.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you had any different perspective on that. But
yeah, so this is towards the end. Obviously, I never got around to watching this match because this is just after I start to follow Japanese wrestling less. But my frustration at the time was that there was just too many promotions and everything was getting too fragmented, and all there's like 4 what I would call like major promotions in Japan, and that New Japan, All Japan, 01, Noah, and then in 03. Riki Choshu leaves New Japan and starts WJ. It just fragmented everything so much that nobody was able really to be that strong. And of course, at this time, you've got Inokiism running wild and killing New Japan.
Yeah.
So it was like I really got super into Japanese wrestling at a time where it was really on the decline. And I kind of wish, and I guess the Japanese culture just wasn't conducive to this. Like I wish that some of them had gotten together and merged and put their resources together and put their talent rosters together to build up a stronger company.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because you were in the Voice Wrestling Slack. Do you remember what I don't know if you were around the other day, where Gerard DiTrolio, he found like an old note from a Wrestling Observer when Kojima and Muto and Kendo Kashin jumped from New Japan to All Japan at the start of 2002. There's like a note in there about how the Japanese telecom giant SoftBank was going to basically try to take on New Japan by like merging All Japan and Noah and 01. So like that apparently almost happened. That we almost had like the super group to take down New Japan. But
wow.
I mean, if you like having a company the size of the name probably doesn't mean anything to most people listening, but SoftBank is a gigantic company. I mean, you're talking about like in the billions of dollars in revenue per year, I believe, the last time I looked it up. I mean, way bigger even than Cyber Agent, who's already way bigger than Bushiroad. So
yeah, Masayoshi-san is the big CEO there. I hear SoftBank name dropped on some like tech business podcasts I listen to.
Yeah, I mean you'll go through the name all over the place if you go to Japan. Yeah. I mean, they are a gigantic company. So having a SoftBank backed wrestling conglomerate would have been something. But apparently it didn't happen. They just
it just seemed like 01 in All Japan they already were doing interpromotional stuff. Like this match is an example of it. It seems like they were in a really good position to just like merge or have a really strong. I don't know. I guess they did have a partnership of some sort, but it's just they were separately. They're spread so thin,
Yeah, and it's something that just doesn't happen. as I've learned as a Japanese wrestling fan. It's like once they split off, they never really come back. I mean, Wrestle 1, you could see people were screaming for Wrestle 1 to rejoin All Japan all that time. It never happened. They just closed, and then the wrestlers just kind of end up, scattered all over.
Yeah, I've sat down and I've drawn it out. Like the history of Japanese wrestling is just a history of fragmentation, like starting with Riki Dozan to Inoki and Baba Misawa, and so on,
Yeah. It's a very they just split. I mean, they split a lot. I mean, Joshi even split earlier, I think, than men's wrestling too.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because you have all these different splits. That was based on like the age retirements and stuff, and all the women's. Right. But but this match itself, it's an interesting match. It's not like a all-time classic or anything. It's really not like a match that I think, I remember reading at the time that people. Were disappointed by it, and I get why, because like these are two all-time legends, but like the stuff in this match that's really good is really good. I mean, like where they square off and like they trade these leg kicks in a pretty great sequence, ending with like this big sweep from Hashimoto that Kawada sells like death. I mean, that is really good stuff, and just there's some amazing striking in this match and some really good selling from Kawada especially. But yeah, there's I don't know. What did you think of this one? Did you like it?
It's good. I probably would have been slightly disappointed at the time. I probably would have been really hoping that Kawada and Hashimoto could have this classic match. It's sort of at the end. I'm sort of left to wonder, what would a match between these two have been like when they were closer to their physical prime, and when the business was closer to its prime, where the crowd would have been hotter. This is the Budokan, and it's super darkened, so I don't know what the attendance was. On Cage Match it's listed as 16,000. I highly doubt it was 16,000. But the crowd isn't as hot, but it's good. It's a good match, but it's not like the classic that you might hope it would be on paper when you see these two names who are a member of the Three Musketeers against a member of the Pillars here.
Yeah. I mean, I think I might, based on what you just said, I think I might like it more than you do. But I thought like the striking was really, really high level, and Kawada's selling was really great. Some other stuff wasn't so great. Like there was like a backdrop by Hashimoto at one point that looked, or by Kawada on Hashimoto that looked a little botched. And like I never liked the stretch plum. I don't know what you think about it, but like that to me was always one of the weaker aspects of Kawada, where like I just never thought that submission looked great. And he's a guy that that wrestles in a promotion that never seemed to take submission super seriously anyway, so that I'm sure that also hurt its perception. Right. But like so like the long stretch plum here doesn't really work great for me.
Right. And the stretch plum is the finish here. I have no big problem with the stretch plum itself if it's protected as a big finish. I think there are a couple matches I've seen where Kawada wins with the stretch plum, but it's very rare.
Yeah.
And as you said, in All Japan in general, throughout in the decade of the 90s, there's very few at least high profile submission finishes. But like I'm fine with almost any hold if it's over and protected. It's a little bit of a sudden finish. It's not like there's a ton of near falls and a big chase to the finish here. There's almost like a little bit of tragedy in that. These are just two kind of broken down horses who used to be stronger stallions in the past, and they're just like nailing each other with super stiff kicks.
Yeah. I mean, the kicks are the best part of this match by a mile. And that really elevates it to me, where even, some of the other stuff can be a little boring. I mean, there's this great spot where Hashimoto, like, when he gets out of the stretch plum, after the strike exchange, he basically, like, he chops the leg to take back over, which is, like, a good little callback to, like, this leg work that came much earlier in the match that we had kind of forgotten about. And then he totally, like, wrecks him with this awesome running middle kick, where it's like that was like the best, like the biggest flash of the old Hashimoto. Like that middle kick looks so good. And then he gets a brainbuster, but like is too busy like selling his legitimately injured shoulder from the stretch plum before to follow up or go for the pin. So again, very, very good psychology. And then Kawada, he gets back up, and then Hashimoto like whips his ass with yet more kicks. And the crowd, like you said, which wasn't super into it early for the level you might expect for two legends, they're like really into this match now. Like they're going really nuts. And he goes for another brainbuster, but Kawada blocks it, and they do like this cool little double like exhaustion spot, but where they're both standing up, which you don't see very often, but I think it works here. Like you said, because they're both like these old war horses kind of, and it feels like, it just feels natural for the drama. but yeah, then like he tries it again, but Kawada fights out with, like the knees and kicks and forearms and another enziguri, and this is where the striking is like just really really awesome. And like you said, but basically, they fight out with more kicks. Hashimoto goes down from an enziguri, almost like a timber kind of moment, which I actually liked, and then Kawada locks in the stretch plum again, and Hashimoto's corner throws in the towel, which I like a good towel throw and finish. It's like that's a good. We don't see much of that, but it almost feels like somebody in the corner took it away from you, kind of. But it's a cool finish.
Yeah, do you think that's like part of the politics of like, well, we'll let you beat Hashimoto, but we're gonna do this finish?
Yes, I'm sure. Yeah, but yeah, I don't. Again, I star rating, I would go 4 stars. I don't think it was like, again, not an all-time classic, but I enjoyed the striking enough and the Kawada selling enough, and just like these two legends being in there and like having these exchanges enough to go 4 stars flat on it. Again, not an all-time classic, but I'm glad they had this match, and especially with how little time that was left in Hashimoto's career, it's good that they had this match together. But I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if you're a star rating guy. If you want to give it a rating.
No, I was thinking earlier today, like, I might get asked about star ratings. I've done some reviews for Voices of Wrestling where I've given stars, but I think at the time I was like, I think I have to like privately star things and like calibrate my my star measurement system, and it's been so long since I've practiced the art of star rating, of star giving, that I'm not well calibrated. But it's a good match. I wouldn't argue with you about 4 stars.
And then, like, as far as, like I said, a meeting between these two absolute legends, I mean, this is it for a singles match. They had two tag team matches in 2003, which I'd be interested to go back and see if they're any better. But it's around the same era, so you wouldn't think either guy would be in much better shape. But yeah, one was in All Japan and one was in 0-1. And then a few weeks after this, they teamed up in a pretty famous match against Kevin Randleman and Mark Coleman, the MMA fighters, in Hustle. So... which I remember people like got a really kick out of, because Kevin Randleman was like a surprisingly good pro wrestler, but for someone who had very little experience. But yeah. Okay, so your second pick was Toshiaki Kawada versus Kensuke Sasaki from New Japan, October 9th, 2000. So we're going backwards 4 years here, but we're sticking with Kawada, this time for his big showdown with Kensuke Sasaki. So this was the shadow of the Noah split, basically in the shadow of the Noah split, where All Japan... they lose the entire native roster except for 2 guys, Kawada and Fuji, and I'm sure most people know that story. But then Fuji shows up at a New Japan show, I believe at the G1 final, because definitely Sumo Hall.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And he shows up and says, the exact translation I think is something like he wants to tear down the walls between the 2 companies, and that basically meant we're going to do New Japan, All Japan. It wasn't quite a feud or an invasion because, quite frankly, All Japan did not have enough wrestlers to do either of those things. But it was more like, All Japan guys will participate here and New Japan guys will participate in All Japan. And Keiji Muto ends up forming like an interpromotional stable. It's a really interesting period. A period I like a lot, actually.
What's the name of the stable? Like Bat?
Yeah, it's like Badass Translation Team. BATT,
that's right.
Yeah. So, it's like him, Taiokeya, Hiroshi Hase, and then somebody else, I think. But yeah, that feud produced a lot of awesome stuff from like the fall of 2000 until January 4th, 2002. Because right after the 1402 Dome show, that's where Muto and Satoshi Kojima and Kendo Kashin jump to New Japan, and that ends the cooperation. But yeah, so like this, so it's like about a year and like 4 months basically, and there's a lot of really cool stuff in this period. Obviously, this was like a really big match. Basically Sasaki, the ace at the time, or at least the IWGP Heavyweight Champion. He's facing Kawada for some reason, not for the title. Even though after Sasaki loses his match and vacates the title, then they have a tournament final on January 4th, 2001, back at the Tokyo Dome, where Sasaki beats Kawada to win the title. So it's like, why did they just have Kawada win the title and lose it to Sasaki? I've never seen a good explanation for that. I have no idea what the answer is. I guess you kind of, it's in everybody's best interest for All Japan to get a big win at the beginning of this interpromotional feud, because All Japan is clearly the weaker promotion between the two.
So I don't know, and I guess
they probably just they just didn't want him to win the title. I guess.
Yeah, I guess maybe who knows if we'll come back and lose it back to us. But and then Kensuke gets his win back anyway because he's gonna beat him on January 4th.
Yeah,
I was really hoping for an Okada and Kawada match too, especially with the Have you seen the December 14th 2000 tag match?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I love that match.
And like they have like a big stare down at the end, and you think it's gonna happen. You think it's gonna happen, and then it never happens. There's so many examples of that in Japanese wrestling around this time, though, because like there's that famous first 0-1 tag where like it feels like they're building to Misawa versus Hashimoto, and then they have another tag in Noah, and you're like, okay, we're doing this, let's go, and it never happens. They never do the singles match. So yeah.
Misawa never really gets in the ring in the singles, except for with Chono, and they do like a 30-minute draw. Remember that in the Tokyo Dome?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's also the Kobashi Chono 60-minute draw too, and like that was pretty much it.
No, Kobashi beats Chono.
Oh, you're right. What am I thinking of? 60.
Chono and Nagata had a 60-minute draw.
You're right.
October 2002.
You're right. Yeah. So Kobashi does beat Chono. I wonder what the fuck New Japan got back for that. Because Akiyama beats. Akiyama beats Nagata in the main event of the Dome too. It's like, Noah really got the better of them in that feud.
Yeah. Well, like supposedly the deal with Akiyama and Nagata is like if Nagata beats Crow Cop, Nagata can go over. But if he loses, Akiyama's going over, and of course he gets crushed.
Yeah, that makes sense actually. I mean, I know that the people who were booked in charge of Noah, I think it's a guy by the name of Ryu Nakata, I think was his name. I could have that name wrong, but that's off the top of my head. And he was like the business side of Noah. And I remember, like from what I've read of people's accounts of the time, he was like really, really hardcore about like, we cannot do jobs in interpromotional. We have to go over because we have to establish this promotion. And he was like, because I guess they had these stars that everybody wanted, Misawa and Kobashi and even Akiyama, that like they were able to take a really hardline position with these companies and like just really never do jobs in these interpromotional feuds.
Yeah,
I mean, sorry, go ahead.
I'm struggling to think of a time where any of those three, Akiyama, Kobashi, or Misawa, ever lost the fall outside of Noah.
Yeah, it's really...
Or to somebody outside of Noah at all.
It probably never happened. I mean, they probably... I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
I think maybe Akiyama might have got pinned at some point in like a tag, but I don't remember.
Yeah, but it's pretty rare, so... Mm-hmm. Unless both of us were getting something obvious and people are screaming.
I doubt it. And in tags, they would always like put Misawa with Ogawa or something. You have the obvious fall guy or Muto with Kea. I think that match happens in a Tokyo Dome in 04, I think.
Yeah. But it's very interesting. But yeah, so back to this match. This, I guess I never even asked you, why'd you pick this one? Just it's one of your favorites. Right?
I love this match. I think it's really influential as far as the trade battle. And I'm sure there's probably other matches that people could point to say this is. I mean, I think like Hashimoto and Tenryu from '98 is a great match that has some similarities as far as just the endless strike battles. It's just a match that I got on a really fast turnaround on VHS in the year 2000 when I was 15 years old, and like just. It was a special experience of just waiting for the mail truck to come and to see if it was going to have your tape in there, and it's really great today that we have endless access to all these streaming services and YouTube and Daily Motion that has everything out there that you could ever want. But it was just such a special experience where you just got this taste, you just got this really limited window into this other world that I enjoyed so much better than what I was seeing on TV at the time. And I I probably was spoiled and I probably knew what the finish was, but I just marked out watching this match and just watching them lay into each other with all these chops, and then later on they lay into each other with the lariats. But yeah, it was I loved the match, and I think it's really influential as far as you might say it's overdone today with the trade battles, especially if you watch a lot of US indie wrestling. There's a lot of trade battles, and I think this is a match that sort of it influences the next chapter. You might say of this is Sasaki and Kobashi in the Tokyo Dome, where they just endlessly chop each other.
Yeah,
and I think there's a lot of like Ishii and Shibata matches where they just endlessly go at each other. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think you cut out there for a second. But yeah, I mean, this is like you said, a very influential match with the trade battles, and also with like, you know, the lariat versus the enziguri. You know, like the way like he'll lariat down the enziguri and he'll enziguri down the lariat, which I think is, you know, just a very very famous sequence. Sasaki to me also, like, when I picture Kensuke Sasaki, I can picture him with that fucking leather jacket, with that IWGP title, the crown belt, you could call it, like standing back there at the Tokyo Dome. I mean, that is like such an iconic image of Sasaki.
And that fucking mullet before he cut it off.
He looks so cool. I mean, like, as cool as any wrestler's ever looked, I think.
Yeah, I took a note, like, just that close-up of, I think somebody was telling you in the Discord, like, you have to watch this version of it with the entrances. Like, just that smoky close-up of Kensuke Sasaki standing back there, and his music's playing, and he's just waiting to go out, and he's kind of got his lips pursed, and he's ready to go out there and kick some ass and have a fight and defend New Japan.
Yeah.
And the other cool thing in the entrance here is that, I think you may have a better idea of this than I do, but like there's New Japan fans and there's All Japan fans, and there is sort of a sentiment, I think, this is a New Japan show, this is a New Japan Tokyo Dome show, and you've got Kawada marching down there to wrestle in the main event, and like people throw trash at him on the ramp as he's walking out, because an All Japan wrestler doesn't belong in the New Japan ring.
Yeah, I mean that you know, that aspect of interpromotional. And like, you know, fans being of this promotion and not liking the other promotions wrestlers. I mean, that has always been one of my favorite things about Japanese wrestling. That does not really exist in America. I mean, if you know, WWE doesn't do interpromotional really unless they bought the company and want to book it into the ground. And, you know, American indies, they all have the same. I mean, there aren't enough indies with rosters, you know, like it's like the only big example I can think of is like, you know, Ring of Honor versus CZW is like a really good example, which had that kind of feeling of like, you know, us against them and their fans versus our fans. But that happens in Japan like all the time. I mean, like a lot. That it probably has happened less in recent years, which is, you know, a little annoying, honestly. And I think they're going to get back to it. And I was tweeting about this earlier today. I think you're going to see more interpromotional stuff when Japanese wrestling gets going again, because it's like very ingrained in Japanese wrestling to go back to that during like a time of crisis or a time of things going down, basically, which I think we're going to be in both. So I think you're going to see more of that probably. But yeah, I mean, just that like that rooting for, you know, your promotion's wrestlers, and you don't want to see the other promotion's wrestlers, and you want your wrestlers to kick their ass. I mean, it's like the closest you get to like sports teams, basically. So
yeah, would you say it's sort of the same thing? Is the Japanese culture in the way that in Japanese promotions you don't have people jumping between promotions, right? Like you do here in the U.S.
Yeah,
because there's so much loyalty, and I'm guessing it's a similar thing where fans just become loyal to this company,
right? And everything I've always heard is that there's a lot more like specific promotion loyalty in Japan among the fans than there is here even. And like, you know, there is like such a thing as like a general Japanese smark, but like there's way less of them basically than there are here. Like most people have a home promotion where they go to all that company's shows, and maybe they'll check out some other company. But it's often like the most common time when they check out some other companies when, you know, their company's wrestlers are wrestling there. That's why, like, even when you see Daisuke Sekimoto and Yuji Kobayashi in All Japan, they have like, you know, this clear contingent of big Japan fans who just came out to support them at Korakuen. So I mean, that's like the kind of thing that happens a lot there. But yeah, so this match owns. I mean, it's so awesome. You know, I wrote down a bunch of spots here again, but like there's a long like slap exchange in the middle that is just so good before Kawada just finally like punches him in the head and then puts him down with the enziguri. And again, this is a match that you know, features so much badass striking, and it's probably one of my favorite things about, you know, in wrestling.
And the punch, it's got the classic Kawada sell where like rather than like bumping or like flopping around, he just like slowly squats.
Yeah. And it's like, you know, it is really something. The stretch plum is as over as I've ever heard it, honestly, here. And I think it's because New Japan crowds are trained to have a submission end a match. I mean, the stretch plum is like, the crowd gets really into it here. But yeah, and then there's like a great spot where Sasaki, you know, he powers out of the powerbomb with a back body drop and then just absolutely destroys Kawada with a lariat. And this is one of the most awesome lariats I've ever seen. And then he just like keeps throwing these badass lariats, and goes for the Scorpion Deathlock, which is a callback to his mentor Riki Choshu, but Kawada makes the ropes. And then they end up having like a lariat exchange in the middle that ends up with Sasaki destroying him again with another enormous one. But then Kawada just like pops up and hits the big boot, and it's like the great example of the Puro delayed sell. Not no sell, because people always confuse that, but delayed sell. He does sell it.
Yeah. And it's kind of a double down, and it's followed up by great camera work. We were talking about the great camera work before, but there's a great it's very similar, I think, to the kind of New Japan camera work you see today, where there's this great like foreground and background contrast. They have this double down, and I think it's Kensuke hits the first thing, and then Kawada pops up and hits the kick, right? And so but anyway, I don't know what the order is, but there's this great foreground and background contrast where Kawada is just like just sweat's dripping down off of his face, and he's like pounding the canvas trying to get up, and in the background, Kensuke is coming alive, and he's having this facial expression, he's gritting his teeth at him, and it's a great moment.
Yeah, I mean, it is like you said, the camera work here is like there's like a certain kind of New Japan, like old school Tokyo Dome production that I kind of miss, honestly. Even during some of the years that I think people don't like the No Kinesum years and stuff, like the production was always at like a really high level. And I'm not saying it's not good now, but I kind of feel like we have gone a little backwards. But yeah, then we see like towards the end of it, like there's Kawada hits like yet another Enziguri to the face, then he hits like 3 more to the back of the head, and you're just like, how is Sasaki still even standing? But then he does like the famous lariat to block the Enziguri, which is again such a cool spot. The way he just like roars when he does it, it's like one of those really iconic moments to me. But then he runs in for yet another lariat, and Kawada counters with another Enziguri, and then crawls over for the pin. And the crowd is so stunned that this is the pin, because it takes him a while to crawl over. But the idea is like this kick is it, like that's it, he knocked him out. And that was like he couldn't kick out at that point, no matter how long it took to crawl over.
I remember when I watched this for the first time, I remember thinking like, whoa, because like I think I knew who went over. I may have even known what the finishing move was. But like this isn't a match with a bunch of near falls, or like, I mean, Kawada never goes for the power bomb, which is what I would say he wins is the move that he used to win matches with most often. And it's a little bit of a sudden finish, but it's sort of like it's not a finish that feels like too abrupt or like it didn't make sense. It's like they unloaded on each other with all these crazy strikes, and then it has this peak moment where he hits him with the kick, and he goes down, and he just sort of like crawls over and puts his arms over him and gets the pin. But I do love that moment where, as you said, like he hits Kensuke hits the lariat on the Enziguri attempt, and I think as a result of hitting all these kicks, and as a result of taking that lariat to the foot, the post match, they have to take the kick pad off, and I don't know if it's on this clip that I watched. I watched the Daily Motion clip, but I remember seeing like, that his with Fuchi and whoever the other All Japan guys are sort of like helping Kawada to the back, and the boot is off. It's just like Kawada's socked foot, and he's limping to the back because these kicks were so intense, and he hit him with the lariat. My God, he probably broke his ankle. There's like just a really cool sell.
So it is on the New Japan World version. I don't think it is on the Daily Motion one. But you could do what I do, people. You could watch the Daily Motion one just for the entrances, and then switch to the New Japan World, because the New Japan World, just the video quality is better, and you get like the entire segment of Fuchi like coming out for some reason. They put that the entire 7-minute segment for the match. I thought that was interesting. But yeah, this match owns. I don't quite think it's the full 5, but it's really, really close for me. I would go like 4 3/4. It's really like an absolutely amazing match. One of those really classic matches, and I think way better than the January 4th one.
Way better.
Yeah, the January 4th one was kind of a letdown, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I mean, I love strikes, I love lariats, and it's right up my alley. But both guys are so badass here, and it just totally rolls. So good pick.
Fuchi's just overwhelmed with joy when Kawada gets the pin. They put the camera on Fuchi, and like memorably, Liger is over there in Sasaki's corner. But like, just Fuchi is just like, he can't believe it. Oh, he's so relieved that Kawada has won.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of those matches where like somebody somebody had to win and somebody had to lose. But I don't know if Kensuke Sasaki ever recovers from this, honestly, especially in New Japan, But, he would have to, basically leave the company and, totally reinvent himself before he really became a gigantic star again. So,
he leaves at the beginning of 2003 with Choshu to go to WJ, and that doesn't last long. And then he has they cuts the mullet off, and he has a really good run outside.
Yeah. Right? So basically, the World Japan thing is a complete disaster. I think he's gone by the end of the year. But yeah, he cuts the mullet off. He goes back to New Japan as a freelancer who, everybody hates, and has an incredibly bloody match with Yuji Nagata at a January 4th Dome show. I think it's 2004. It might be 2005, but I'm pretty sure it's 2004. And then he goes to Noah and has a really big run there. He has a big run in All Japan and wins the Triple Crown. He just kind of wrestles all over. He becomes a Florida brother, memorably, which I remember Akira Hokoto gave all the credit to that for his revival. She basically said it was because he became a Florida brother. But yeah, that's his wife, by the way. People listening don't know. But yeah, so that's that match. Great pick, Brandon.
Thanks.
My second pick, Kazuchika Okada versus Tetsuya Naito, New Japan, March 4th, 2012. So this is Okada's first defense right after the Rainmaker shock, which lets me plug the Patreon again, patreon.com/WrestlingOmakase, because we just covered that match in the Okada-Tana one-match series. So that's, Okada wins the title there, and you can hear all about that on the Patreon. And then at the end of that match, Naito comes out and challenges Okada, which means, this is Okada's first defense. It's not the first Okada-Naito match, because they had that match in, I believe, August 26, 2007, on the Farewell to CTU show, because I think it's got that black ring mat with the CTU logo, where they're both young lions, and it's not even just Okada's young lion, it's Okada, as an incoming trainee. This is right after New Japan essentially buys his contract from Ultimo Dragon, which gives Ultimo Dragon the money to keep his school in Mexico going for a few more years. And, so this is right after he's jumping to New Japan, or he's essentially been bought by New Japan, and before they decide to put him in through their own training. So he does his match with Naito, he loses via Boston Crab, and, Naito at the time was already a young lion, and then he vanishes for, I believe, 6 months or more, I think until March or April 2008, and then he re-debuts as a real New Japan young lion, and he stays that way for 2 years before he leaves in a match against Tanahashi that's also covered on the Patreon, January 31st, 2010, and that's his last match before he goes to TNA for that very memorable Okato run that made New Japan never want to do business with TNA again in any incarnation. But then comes back, the famous bad debut of the Tokyo Dome that, just looks so funny now in hindsight, and then a month later, 2012, February 2012, beats Tanahashi for the title. So this is an interesting match. First of all, it's, to date, the final IWGP heavyweight title match held at Korakuen Hall. They had basically it had become a brief tradition of always having a IWGP title defense at Korakuen during the spring, and business really wasn't great during this period, which is, I'm sure, a major reason why they did this. But yeah, they have it's where Nakanishi beat Tanahashi for the title in May 2009. Nakamura retained against Goto in 2010, and Tanahashi retained against Nagata in 2011. So this is the last one. The following year in 2013, they debut Invasion Attack, which, as we discussed earlier, becomes Sakura Genesis as a spring big show in Tokyo at Sumo Hall. So that title defense essentially replaces this one, is the easiest way to think about it. But yeah, so I imagine it must be people on the Discord channel for Wrestling Omakase, which, by the way, you can always join the Discords, and it's in the description. The people in the Discord channel were saying it was just so weird to see an IWGP heavyweight title match in Korakuen, and that's one of the things I think is very interesting about this match, where if you came on in the last 7 years, you've never seen a title match at Korakuen. So
right, and I think that applies to me. So this is totally a blind spot. So I'm glad you picked this match from the era just before I started to get back into New Japan.
Yeah.
So they were going to Sumo Hall sometimes at this point, still, right?
Yeah, King of Pro Wrestling was always at Sumo Hall in October. So,
okay.
And then
yeah, because it was remarkable to me that this is happening in Korakuen Hall here.
Yeah. But yeah, so like basically, you know, the schedule was starting to become what you would think of now. Like New Beginning was in Osaka Prefectural Gym. Dominion was still also in Osaka Prefectural Gym at this point. It would not go to Osaka Joe Hall until 2015. But yeah, I mean, like this was the last big switch, I think, to move the spring big show over to Sumo Hall starting the following year. But yeah, so Naito and Okada. Naito gets like a big chant coming out, and I guess the people who insist he was never over as a babyface before LIJ should watch this match, I guess, because he was. I don't know what to tell them. I mean, you could attest to it. He was very over in this match.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see the contrast of like I was watching New Japan a little bit before he did the LIJ turn, but just to see it again, to see the old babyface Naito was a little bit jarring. But yeah, he was over, and he was just like being like a regular, you know, Japanese wrestler babyface, and it's a very different character now, starting with the G1 in 2015, right, when he started to like saunter out with his hat on.
Yeah, he came right back from I don't know I think it might have been Dominion 2015. It was like right around there. So like Dominion or G1, where he comes back from CMLL and suddenly is acting like an asshole in these tag matches with the New Japan guys. But yeah. I mean he basically would hit like a downward slope as a babyface, and like after coming back from I believe a knee injury in 2013. And you know, and then like, you know, the Ishii feud in 2014 didn't do him any favors either. You know, where like they had awesome matches, but I was just talking about this in the Slack again the other day. Like they match up Naito with Ishii in 2014 after he loses that Dome match, right? Where he's already starting to get booed by a lot of crowds as a babyface, and it's like that was the exact wrong guy to match up a guy that you want to push as a babyface that is getting slightly rejected, because like Ishii is this like tough, badass dude who like the entire crowd loves. I mean, this is like, if anything, the peak of Ishii mania at this point. And you know, they put Naito in there, and it's like, well, all it did was accentuate all the stuff they don't like about him, like, oh, he's, you know, too soft, or he's like the pretty boy or whatever. So it just didn't work at all. And like, I think that was like the real death knell for his babyface push. And then, you know, he just kind of is in a holding pattern until 2015 when the LIJ thing happens. But yeah, I mean, like, he was still really over here at this point, and you know, the crowd was still really behind him. Okada, on the other hand, like, his reaction coming out is very subdued, and you have to remember, basically, his win over Tanahashi in February was in Osaka, and that was the last show before this one. There was like no shows in between that show and this show. So the last time the Tokyo fans have seen him in front of them, I mean, that was the disastrous you know, Wrestle Kingdom return with Yoshi, where he beats Yoshihashi in like 8 minutes with that like weird falling neck breaker version of the Rainmaker. So yeah, like the Tokyo fans are still like, I think, in kind of like you know, show us what you got mode with him. Like, they're not really behind him yet. It does, I think, as the match goes along, they start to warm up to him, and you start to hear more and more Okada chants. But I do think that's just a little interesting. You know, because later on Okada will definitely have a huge fan base in Tokyo, but I just don't think he has it yet at this point. But yeah, this match rules, and like, you know, there's like it's another leg match, and Okada for
there's knee work in all 5 of the matches that we picked here.
That's kind of crazy, right? But yeah, I mean, Okada does a really great job selling the leg in this match, and you know, you think for a guy who had very little under his belt, he does a better job selling the leg in this match than he does in a lot of matches to follow. I think, anyway. Where I think sometimes the selling can be one of the weaker parts of his game, but like, he's really good at selling the leg here. I mean, he is like just really, really good at it. Do you have any thoughts on, I guess, okay?
I would note too, just after watching, this was the 4th match I watched out of the 5, and after watching all these matches that are so heavy on strikes and suplexes and head drops and what have you, this match started with chain wrestling.
Yeah. They just kind of, they started out pretty you know, on the mat and stuff. I like the mat stuff they did early. I've always been a big fan of that. But yeah, Okada, like, he gets the tombstone like super early too, which is surprising, but he's like too busy studying his leg to follow up, and then Naito like rolls to the floor. And then like later on, Naito does like a proto combination cabron almost, where he sweeps Okada's leg from the apron, the way he would now to start that. Yeah. But Okada doesn't go down. He like kind of hops on one leg, which is kind of funny looking, but it kind of works. And then Naito does this awesome like missile basement dropkick, which he also used in a match we watched recently on this show with Nakamura in the 2011 G1 finals. But yeah, that's such an awesome move. He doesn't do it anymore, but it's such a cool move.
Yeah, the sweep was almost Hashimoto like. Would you say? I'm trying to think of like Naito matches that I've seen recently. Do you think he's faster and he's more athletic here?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, he doesn't have that. He's not. I mean, I'm one of the
8 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, not a person that thinks he's fucking broken down now, and he's in my match of the year for this year for sure. But he's definitely doesn't have quite the same. I don't know if it's speed, but like explosiveness, maybe like with the leaping and stuff. But like he can still run pretty fast when he gets going, but like maybe it's more like a consistent speed or like a consistent explosiveness here. But like you said, it's 8 years and a lot of miles, so not really that surprising. But I don't want people to think I'm supporting the Dave Meltzer Naito is like one bump from death narrative, because I don't think that's true. But yeah, another point, he like drapes Okada's leg over the railing, like slaps him in the face, which is such a great. I love that spot because he just like he does not have to do that. Okada's already not moving. It almost feels like an extra fuck you, basically. And then he gets back on the apron and does this awesome drop kick to the leg on the railing from the apron. It just looks great, and that gets an enormous Naito chant. So
Naito himself takes a hell of a bump on the floor in delivering that move too.
Yeah, well, that has not changed in 8 years. he'll still find whatever way to take the craziest bump he can. So yeah, later on, Okada comes back with like another tombstone. This one on the floor, and that tombstone looks vicious. I mean, he like nearly drives his head into the black mat. It looks pretty bad. Pretty badass, but like also pretty dangerous. And then Okada, hits a big DDT back in the ring, and then he goes to the deep in debt. What do you think of the deep in debt? I always hated that move. It just looks very silly to me.
I imagine that's the move that I've written down here as Dragon Gate subs.
It looks very out of place in New Japan.
Does he not do that anymore?
No, not for a long time. Yeah. I mean, I think I was talking about this on the Patreon. I don't know exactly when he switches from the deep in debt to the red ink, which is like sort of like that cross-legged STF thing. And that move has its own problems too, but it still looks a lot like more in line with with a typical New Japan submission move. The deep in debt looks very silly. So he hasn't busted that one out in a long time, I don't think, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, I guess it makes sense you would have a Toryumon / Dragon Gate submission since he came from that, training, but it doesn't really work here. But yeah, so Naito eventually escapes it and he gets his own like a reverse figure 4 that Okada escapes, and then Okada he's like whips Naito in. Naito hits maybe his best flying forearm ever. I mean, it is he gets such incredible height on this thing. Like
he does like a Shawn Michaels like hits the forearm to like simmer into is he about to do a comeback kind of thing.
Yeah, and then he hits like this awesome enziguri, and then a German suplex hold for a near fall. The crowd is like, sounds like they're having a stroke. And then Naito, he sets him up on the top rope and hits the top rope Rana, and then like a really great dragon suplex where it's not like a traditional dragon suplex hold. He basically rolls through the hold part and like kind of like stacks him up for the pin. It looks really cool. So it's a really cool, like unique kind of pin. Like all these moves that he doesn't do anymore that are really cool looking. And then he hits Glory.
And I really feel like at this point in the match, they've really, and I think you see this a lot in main event New Japan matches where like it feels like things are at a fever pitch and that there's like this chase to the finish. And as much as I like the other 3 matches that we've already watched, like those matches never enter this sort of like, oh my god, fever pitch. They're exchanging holds. They're going for the finish kind of feeling that, especially after he hit misses the Stardust.
Yeah. I mean, like the New Japan stretch runs are pretty. I mean, when they can get corny, on occasion, but like when they hit, I mean, they're like among the best things in wrestling probably. So, So he hits Gloria, he goes up top of the Stardust Press, and Okada rolls out of the way. And then, Okada does like the reverse neck breaker on the knee. He goes for the heavy rain. He's still starting to like here, so that's good. He hasn't forgotten about it. He hits heavy rain for a near fall. So he goes for the Rainmaker. Naito catches the arm. He turns it into a cradle. I wish to God that had been the pin. That would have been an incredible... If Naito was winning, he should have won with that. That would have been like the greatest finish of all time. It was such a great like counter into that cradle.
Yeah, this finishing stretch is really good. Like there's a minute or two before it where they're really having a really nice dramatic sort of folding and unfolding, where I think there's the top rope Hurricane Rana, and then they sort of sell and come back into another thing. But then they really speed it up, and they have like I couldn't even take notes about what was happening because there's this there's the Rana, or I'm sorry, the Rainmaker attempts that Naito counters, which I think you just mentioned with this really hot pin cradle. And they come apart, and then they go eventually into the finish.
Yeah. So Naito, I tried to write it all down. Let's see here. So Okada, he goes to the Rainmaker again after right before that. Naito, it's really subtle, and so you might not even know what he was going for. But like he's trying to leap onto Okada and do a reverse Rana, and Okada does this great like subtle counter where he basically just pushes him forward, so his own momentum makes him miss Okada and like land on his feet right in front of him. And that spot is one of those spots where I'm like, how the fuck did they do that so perfectly? I mean, I imagine that must have been like any little wrong thing, and that could have looked very silly, And it's like they managed to make it look absolutely perfect. And then Okada goes for the Rainmaker when Naito lands in front of him, but Naito, he ducks, he goes for another German. Okada does a standing switch and tries his own German. Naito lands on his feet and does this, which one of those images that's stuck in my head for 8 years, where he lands on his feet and sticks his arms out like, I'm still here, I'm going to beat you. Like, the crowd is like, it sounds like these people are like screeching at this point. Like, they're so excited that Naito lands on his feet. And then he ducks into the lariat and goes for the flying forearm again. But that's just like deadly mistake where Okada's ready for it this time and like basically just swats him away, which is such a great like final counter. And then finally hits the Rainmaker. It's an enormous Rainmaker too. Like it looks like he just killed him after all this. Like this little guy, a smaller guy managed to avoid it. But when he finally gets hit by it, it's like complete death and it's over. And then that's the pin. I absolutely adore this match. Again, this is another one where I go back and forth on 4 3/4 and 5. I think it's 4 3/4 because maybe you could say, there's some parts of it that before the final stretch that aren't quite, up to that level. Like I said, the only real flaws you could point to is maybe some of the early portions a little boring. But you could make that critique of a lot of New Japan main events, honestly. And Okada does kind of forget about the leg injury in the final stretch, I guess. He sells it so well for so long, and Naito doesn't go after it for long enough that it doesn't really bother me that much. But, I can kind of nitpick that, I guess, if you want to keep it from 5. I think I probably have said it's full 5 before, but I'm going to go 4 3/4 here. It's just an incredible match. I adore this match.
Yeah, it's an excellent match. I think just like watching this again alongside the other 3 matches up to this point, I guess what stands out here is how maybe the lucha influence is more present, and in fact, the other wrestlers that we already watched at this point maybe never had an excursion in Mexico, but I just think it speaks to how having the young lions go on excursion and get all this experience, and time has gone on, and people can study all these different styles of wrestling now. And now I think what we have in New Japan is where a lot of the wrestling is really good, but we also have an assimilation and like a nice synthesis of all these different styles from all these different regions of the world that are, used in a really, really great way. And I'm thinking especially of that last sequence where they're just going so fast, and Rainmaker this, and he lands on his feet and go through the next thing, and then flow, finish.
Yeah. And I've seen people describe it in a critical way as like everything is the Japanese junior style now, but the Japanese junior style is really good. I mean, that was stuff that people really loved in the 90s. So if there had to be a style that was going to win the quote-unquote wrestling style war, there definitely could have been worse ones, So I mean, I don't know if you even think that criticism is true or not, but it is. I do think there's something to it, but like you said, in a way, I mean, the Japanese junior style to begin with, there's also like lucha influenced and influenced by lots of other stuff too. So it's all relative, I guess.
I guess it's sort of like, I think about wrestling a lot like food. Like if you eat the same thing, for dinner every day, eventually you get sick of it, no matter how great it is. And sometimes you just want to taste different flavors, and I think that's a kind of a useful analogy in that, if it's good to have you can watch all the great New Japan main events of the last 5 years or so, and they may eventually start to wash over you. But then if you put some other different style of, if you watch like a rings match or something, all this that's way different than all the things you've been consuming up to that point. So it's just a different taste,
Yeah, and I think it's also why people get burned out, like at the end of G1s and stuff. Where
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so that match is definitely awesome, and I definitely recommend watching. I mean, pretty much, honestly, this is probably the consistently best batch of matches we've had on this show. So pretty much every match we talked about, if you haven't watched them, you should watch them. That brings us to the last one, which is the fan vote match, which was my pick, Aja Kong versus Hikaru Shida from Oz Academy on September 17th, 2018. So you picked Bailey and Sasha Banks from 2015, yes. And I wanted to counter with a women's match just because it just felt like the thing to do. And I thought of this match mostly because Hikaru Shida is kind of in the news lately. She just won the AEW women's title, so I thought it'd be cool to go back and highlight one of her, maybe her best match ever. I don't know. It's pretty high up there. She was never one of my favorites in Joshi, and I think she could be very inconsistent at times. But this was probably her and the best match I ever saw her in, I think. But yeah, this kind of smoked Bailey and Sasha in the fan vote. So
this is Oz Academy.
Oz Academy, yep.
It did. Yeah. So this is Mayumi Ozaki.
Yep.
Is it her promotion? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a weird thing where it started out as just something she was going to do to entertain herself, and they weren't running that many shows per year, and it grew into a full-time promotion. So it's an interesting little thing. So this is for their openweight title. It was held by Hikaru Shida. She won it back in June 2018. Aja Kong, she had actually been the very first champion back in 2007, but after she held 3 of the first 9 reigns, she hasn't held it since April 2011. So it's been a while for her here. And this is at Oz's big Yokohama Bunka Gymnasium show, which is Bunka Gymnasium show, I should say, which draws very respectable crowds. I mean, this is almost 2,100 people, so pretty decent crowd here. But bigger than some of the men's promotions were drawing at this building at the time. But yeah, I'm assuming you'd never seen this before. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm just guessing.
Absolutely not. Definitely not. Definitely not. Yeah. I would say overall, Shida looks really good in this match. Aja Kong was very efficient, I will say. There's no wasted movement from Aja Kong in this match.
Yeah, I mean, she's 50, so I get it. But
right.
Yeah.
So what would you say? What is I've seen a lot of Aja Kong from the 90s, and I've seen a little bit in the period where I was following in real time in the early 2000s. What is her? She's obviously a legend. She's one of the greatest wrestlers. I'd probably have to say, regardless of gender, one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. But what is her status in the Joshi world at this moment here in 2018?
Probably just as the living legend, kind of who shows up just to kick somebody's ass. But I mean, she is not doing very many jobs, so the fact that she loses this is a big deal. But yeah, I mean, I believe she had been Sendai Girls World Champion either a year before or 2 years before. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she had been Sendai Girls World Champion recently. So she still holds big titles, but definitely more of a a freelance legend role, goes to lots of different places and just makes little appearances. She also, I believe, started getting a lot of variety TV appearances too in Japan.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I think she appeared on TV a bunch of times, and just became a bit of a minor celebrity. I could be wrong on that, but I could have sworn I read that somewhere. And she even did a bunch of comedy matches in DDT and stuff. So You know,
I think I've seen some Stoker Ichikawa versus Aja Kong.
Yeah. So, like, I don't want to call her a comedy figure because that's not really accurate because she still wrestles lots of serious matches. But, like, she also can be a bit of a meme figure, I guess is the way to put it. You know, right? Like, she'll show up to be like, you know, like, haha, it's Aja Kong. So it's like, you know, we're way past the days where she's like, you know, 100% serious heel that, like, is the most feared wrestler in the building. Like, at this point, you know, she's just been around so long that you're never going to have that. You know, you just can't. You can't be this most hated monster forever, right? So you're just going to have too much goodwill built up.
Yeah. So this match picks up later, and I'm sure you'll get into the details. I won't get ahead of you, but like she's gnawing on gum at moments in this match. She's just like sort of standing and waiting for the next spot at times. But yes, all time legend.
Yeah, I mean, she just like she has that like aura, and I feel like that's kind of how she's always worked. Where it's like you have to come to her, like she's not going to come to you, and she's not going to, you know, go out of her way or anything. Like you have to come to her. You know, there's another leg match, but Sheeta does a really good job selling the leg here, so you know it works again. And at one point, Kong like takes that like trademark iron garbage can thing she always carries around with her, and she just like smashes it into her leg in midair when Sheeta tries a knee attack, and that just looks like brutal. And it makes that like one of those wrestling things too that makes like a very satisfying sound. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
if you do anything in pro wrestling that makes noise, people love it.
It's so funny because a couple weeks ago I covered a match. A really famously bad match from ECW. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Sandman and Sabu from like November to November 97, which
I don't think so.
Has like where like every single thing they try goes wrong, and like one of the big problems with the match is that in addition to everything, there's so many spots that like look like shit and especially sound like shit. Like there's no sound to any of it because like these tables keep breaking early or things fall down or ladders fall down or whatever, and you can just hear the crowd go but then at the same time, like, you know, like these groans of disgust or whatever, but at the same time it looks like it hurts like hell. So it's like the worst of both worlds where like you're not getting the reaction as a wrestler, but like you're causing yourself extreme pain. So I don't know, that made me think of that because it's like it's the opposite where like the sound wasn't there with these weapons and these spots, and it just like you couldn't get any reaction because of it.
I've seen a Sandman match where Sandman falls asleep. Have you seen that match?
I don't know. Not off the top of my head, I don't know what you're thinking of talking about.
So in Central New York, there used to be this promotion called 2CW, and they booked a lot of names. And one time they booked Sandman, and in the course of his match, I think he applies a front face lock, and the Sandman falls asleep while applying a front face lock.
That's awesome.
If you search for Sandman falls asleep 2CW, it probably comes up on YouTube.
Okay, I'll have to check that out. But yeah, so there's another badass spot in this match where like Kong like repeatedly headbutts Sheeta's leg, which that looks so cool. And then Sheeta is able to like recover, and she hits a snap suplex on Kong, which is pretty impressive. And then follows up with a missile drop kick. She's still moving slower and selling the leg, which is good. She gets like a cross arm breaker, and I really like the struggle to lock that in. Like, you know, she starts with her like sort of on her belly, and she has to like pull her like all the way over, and then eventually like finally lock in the cross arm breaker. I don't know, the struggle looked really good to me, but. And then she starts like stomping on her arms, where you essentially have like double limb work here. Have you ever tried to do that, like a double limb work match? Is that difficult?
I'm trying to remember. I do an arm bar a lot, so I do a ton of arm work. But I don't know. When you say double limb, though, you mean like both limbs of one person?
No, I mean like I guess maybe there's different, like dueling limb work might be a better way to put it. Like they're targeting your leg and you're targeting their arm.
Not that comes to mind. I think we would be afraid that like, that's too simple, or people will get confused. I think I don't know. It should happen though. I don't know.
Well, now you got an idea for next time.
Yeah.
So they end up on the ramp, and Sheeta goes for like this running knee attack, but Kong like counters into this like brutal looking brainbuster on the ramp. An awesome spot. And after that, we end up with like there's some more great action. And then we end up with like a kendo stick versus iron garbage can standoff, which is won by the garbage can. And then they trade these like Kong does the back fists, and Sheeta does.
A highlight here is after the suplex on the ramp. After the suplex on the ramp. Sheeta almost gets counted out, And as Aja Kong is waiting for the count to reach 20, she is sternly watching as she chews on gum.
Yeah, she's like I said, you got to bring it to her. She's not going to bring it to you. So, there was like a great spot, like basically where they're trading like these back, like Kong's doing the back fists and Sheeta's doing the step up knees, and they both finally go down, and then Kong comes up bloody. So I guess she really, I think it was hard way, right? Would you?
Yeah, I that's what I would guess. I think it's her nose, so probably.
Yeah. So I guess she really got her one of those. She did not look happy, so I don't think it was. She was either acting really well, but I don't think it was blade job. I think she got her hard way.
No, yeah.
But yeah, so it adds a little bit to the end, obviously, as accidental blood almost always does. Have you ever been like accidentally busted open? Has that happened to you yet?
One time I was wrestling Kevin Bennett a couple years ago. Oh, it was a great moment. So like he was standing on the ring apron, and I was standing on the floor. He did a moonsault from the apron to me on the floor, and I took it, and somehow, like, I don't remember anything hurting, but somehow the back of my head got cut open. And well, anyway, we get back in the ring, and there's like blood all over the place, and I tell him, "Hey, you're bleeding," and he's like, "No, I'm not." And then the referee comes up to me and is like, "Hey, I think you're bleeding." I'm like, "Oh shit, I'm the one that's bleeding." And I put my fingers through the back of my hair, and then I look at my hand and it's covered in red. Oh, wow. And then so my hand is just full of blood, and I have to keep wrestling this match. So like I don't know what else to do, but I just put my hand across my chest and just like smear it across my chest, and people go, "Ugh." There's a GIF somewhere. Like I just like spread it across my chest and then just chop the fuck out of them. And yeah, it was a nice moment. There's a good photo of that somewhere. Have you
ever done a blade job either, or no?
No, I've never have.
Not something that interests you, huh?
The situation's just never really. I don't know. It's never really. I guess there are a couple matches I've had that were like, culminating gimmick matches, but it's never been really pitched or discussed. No, I've never done it.
Yeah, because when I used to think about like wanting to be a wrestler when I was a kid, I'd always be like, I don't know if I can cut my forehead open. That sounds pretty gnarly.
So here's a great story. Like when I was, I don't know, 14 or 13 or something like that. Of course, I was doing backyard wrestling. And I would like, I don't know, I'd be watching like Mick Foley DVDs and shit. This is probably exactly what Mick Foley didn't want. But I was like, you know what? It was the era of hardcore, and like I got to get ready for my wrestling career someday. So I like grabbed a steak knife from the kitchen. I went back into my bedroom and closed the door, and like I would like practice like cutting my forehead to see if I could get some color, and and then later on your mom notices and she's like, "What's going on?" And I think my dad, like they lived in different homes, and I remember like telling my dad about it or something, and he was talking to like one of his friends about it or something, and she got all concerned and said like if she hears about that again, she's gonna have to call Child Protective Services, because I was self-cutting, which sounds, people who don't understand the fine art of blading they just can't understand that and think I was doing some sort of self-mutilation.
Yeah. I mean, it does sound pretty crazy to normal people, I think, cutting your own forehead open.
Like your teenage son is cutting himself?
Well, I think it sounds pretty crazy just to people in general, like you cut yourself open during your performance, but yeah.
Yeah, it is nuts, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really that widespread anymore anyway, but...
No, it's not done as much. Yeah. There was a match I had with Jimmy Olsen where, he had me give him like the tope through the ropes into the DDT, and like he started to do it, and I was probably grabbing him too soon, so he had to like hurry up and get it done because I was on him too soon, so my fault. But somehow around the same time during the match, something must have happened where like my fingers hit the guardrail, is my only guess, or maybe I hit his blade, I don't know. But anyway, we're back in the ring, and actually this is before he blades, so I'm jumping all around, but like, yeah, we have the match. I know he's gonna gig like 7 minutes later, and we've already done a spot on the outside where like I must have touched the rail, or maybe I touched his blade, but like there's blood all over my arms, and I'm like, and I go to him, I'm like, already you're bleeding? Like you bladed yourself already? You're not supposed to do it until later. And like, and I didn't even realize it until after the match, where like, oh man, my ring finger and my pinky were sliced open.
Oh wow.
I have no idea, but there's just pictures of me covered in blood from both him bleeding and me bleeding. So,
you bladed your fingers at least. That's something.
Something happened. I have no idea. I think those are the only two times I've really bled in a match.
Right. So let me see where we were here. So Sheeta, I think she stops Kong from going to the top and like slams her off, but then gets like her knee struck attempt like completely shrugged off by Kong, which is a great little thing there. And then she like, so again, I guess the leg selling. Where it annoys me less is like where there's like a long gap where the wrestler was working on the leg, and it doesn't seem like she wasn't working on it for so long that it's completely unrealistic that you could shrug off the pain for a while. So it's okay that it's a little off and on here, but like by the time Kong like starts working, like trying to go back to the leg, it's like it's more like of a callback than anything. And she like nails her in the leg with the kendo stick. She gets it back and then hits her in the face, or Sheeta gets it back, hits her in the face, and then limps around a bit before hitting like a running knee. But like Kong kicks out at one, which is one count kickouts are awesome, pretty much always. Mm-hmm. So especially like later in the match, and then Sheeta goes up top and hits the diving double knee attack for 2, and then she pulls the knee pad down and finally hits one last running knee strike for the pin. So it's a pretty awesome match. I will say I don't think I liked it quite at the same level I remember from 2018. Even though I just excused a little bit, the off and on leg selling is there, especially at the end, and there are a couple little boring stretches. But the stuff that feels like a war, like really feels like a war. And Sheeta, it feels like she overcomes this monster like in the absolute best way. So it's like a very old school Joshi feel to it too, to me, which I think is the whole idea. So I would go 4.5. I really loved it, but not quite the level of some of the other matches we talked about. But
yeah, I guess I'm parachuting in, as people say. Like, I think that this kind of what goes back to what we were talking about way back at the beginning. Was putting over the 6-9-95 match. Is that I'm sure it's much easier to appreciate a match and appreciate a story of a match when you know who the characters are and you know everything that's going on in the context that builds up to it. And it's so like having a great match is not just about like what happens bell to bell, but like the creative vision and the booking and all the meaning that happens before it. When wrestling is harder when you're not over and like all the meanings aren't as well defined, and it's the opposite when things are well defined and you can make something really special.
Right, that's a good way to put it. So in other words, you're saying you didn't like it that much.
If I didn't know who any of these people were, there's like one moment where that takes me out of it, where Aja Kong it's towards the end, and this match does pick up towards the end, but there's still like a moment towards the end, I think, where she's like standing up on her feet and maybe in the cross armbar or something. But anyway, she's bent over, and there's a moment where she kind of has her head up in a way of like watching for the next spot. To me, it's just sort of just like small things where like if I saw somebody younger doing something like that, or like one of our students, it'd be like it's a moment, I would say, of not selling, where so selling is not just showing pain or showing that this move hurt, but selling is like selling the intensity of the match, or selling or reacting and showing body language in a way that helps show a cohesive presentation of something that is a fight and not a cooperation, I guess.
Right. So I guess that makes sense. All right, so we've gone very long, so longer than I usually go on these 5-match episodes. But I had a great time, Brandon. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Do you want to plug your podcast and the Twitter accounts and such?
Yeah, I do Wrestlenomics. There's a website, even Wrestlenomics.com, where I put some written stuff, and there's a lot of resources and spreadsheet links and things of that nature. And on this very wrestling podcast network, you can listen to Wrestlenomics Radio. And you can follow me on Twitter at Brandon Thurston. You can follow the Wrestlenomics account at Wrestlenomics, where we cover the business of wrestling, I think, about as closely as anybody in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you do the exact opposite of what you've done in the last 2 hours and 40 minutes or whatever. But
I never talk about wrestling matches. I just talk about the business of wrestling. And here's a fact that I haven't said on the podcast yet. It takes me about 5 hours to record. I haven't recorded an episode since I've been doing these by myself, like in a monologue style. I've gone under an hour, I think, every time. And it takes me about 5 hours. I'm getting a little bit quicker at it lately, maybe 4. But it takes me about 4 hours to do like a 1 hour podcast because there's just a lot of pausing the recorder and like looking stuff up. It's not always all this stuff that I have off the top of my head. A lot of it anyway.
Well, you do a really good job editing it, because I can't tell that it's not recorded.
If you listen closely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm getting a little bit better at the recording and editing. And I'm working on the sound quality. I'm recording from the walk-in closet right now, in fact.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think it's can definitely recommend it. I listen most weeks, so it's on the Voice of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Just like Wrestling Omakase, which, as always, you can listen to us every week. You can follow us on Twitter at WrestleOmakase. Wrestling would not fit. And folks, like I mentioned at the top, the Patreon is the only place to hear the next episode, which is going to be me and Alan for L, Alan Coulihan from PW Torch, his debut on Wrestling Omakase. That'll be Omakase 148 next week. It'll be exclusively for $5 a month. It gets you that episode plus all of our other audio at patreon.com/Wrestling Omakase. We will have another free episode next week as well, episode number 149. It'll be me and Taylor from another Voices of Wrestling podcast, the Jumping Bomb Audio. I mean, Taylor, I might as well say he's from Omakase because he's made so many appearances on the show, but none yet this year, so it'll be his first in a while. But yeah, so Taylor will be coming back on the show next week. So that'll be next week. Patreon subscribers, patreon.com/Wrestling Omakase for the Allen episode, and then on the Voice of Wrestling Network like normal, it'll be me and Taylor for another 5 matches episode. In the meantime, thank you as always for listening, and we'll see you next time.